Welcome to the all-new Action Network Fantasy Flex Podcast. I am your host, Chris Raybon, joined as always by my guy, Sean Kerner, and we're going to talk all about our final rankings today, Sean.
Yep, it looks like we're both repping the Bengals today. Whose jersey do you got today?
This is AJ Green, and I'm treating it like a throwback because AJ Green was done like 3 years ago. He was, his last productive season was a while ago. So I'm very interested to see how he plays on the Cardinals because I actually was reading that their general manager, Steve Keim, said that before they acquired him, they went back and watched all of his targets from last year, and he had something like 38 were not even in the general vicinity. Now, to me, that's just like, this dude ain't getting open, and so the quarterback kind of has to throw it away. But I don't know, like, is there any chance of an AJ bounce back, do you think?
Potentially. I wouldn't write it off. He's going cheap enough where if you want to throw a flyer out there, he might be worth it. But we can talk about that when we get to the Cardinals. And don't worry, we'll talk about more than just the Bengals today. We will talk about all 32 teams. So can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, we're going to go team by team because if we just go by ADP, what's going to happen is we're going to get way too in the weeds and kind of go like we won't get out of like the third round because there's so much to talk about.
Too into the weeds, no way.
Yeah, so and we've done a couple of pods already. I hope you guys enjoyed them where we've kind of gone from the top of the board down. So we'll go team by team. I think that's a good way to look at it. Talk about guys where they are in our final ranks, any weight movers with the rosters being pared down to 53 now. We have that information. So should be a good pod. And let's kick it off with the AFC East. Let's start there. And let's start with the big news of these past 24 hours or so. Cam Newton, last year's starter for the Patriots, released. That ushers in the Mac Jones era. It's official. He was the better quarterback all camp, according to pretty much every report. Obviously, better quarterback in the preseason. Sean, does this Mac Jones transition impact your ranks for the Patriots, especially Damian Harris and Jacoby Myers?
Yeah, of course it does. And heading into the season, I had them basically split. I had them both projected to start 8.5 games. Obviously, I didn't think they were both going to start 8.5 games. It was just hard to project this offense because it is going to be much different.
It's also hard to start a half game.
Well, yeah. You get benched halfway through. Like,
I got you.
9 at halftime. Like, that's literally what my projections were. Yep. But Cam Newton, he just absorbs all the fantasy points. So he tends to run with the ball a lot more, especially around the goal line. He was stealing easy touchdowns for a guy like Damian Harris in the red zone. So, Mac Jones, he himself may not be a fantasy asset, but he makes everybody else around him better. Not because he's significantly better, but just because he's going to be throwing more. He's going to let the running backs score the goal line touchdown. So I boosted everybody up quite a bit. And Damian Harris, honestly, is one of the biggest beneficiaries. And I mentioned this, I want to say back in June when we first started our 2021 pods is, Damian Harris's stock could go way up if they happen to get rid of Sonny Michel, which they did. They traded him away and then announced Mac Jones as a starter for week 1. And that happened as well. So Damian Harris is all the way up to running back 27 for me. Unfortunately, I don't think he can go much higher because, his receiving upside is capped due to James White. But he's going to be a much higher floor play now with more rushing touchdown upside. I think he's the kind of guy that will be an RB2 whenever the Patriots are favored. So I think this helps Damian Harris out significantly, along with the wide receivers. But I don't think any particular wide receiver is really worth drafting right now, per se. They probably need one of them to go down to become like a wide receiver 3 upside. And then you have both tight ends kind of canceling each other out a bit. So there's still a bunch of players kind of underneath the surface for the Patriots. So I'm not too high on the pass catchers, even though Mac Jones does boost them all.
Yeah. So first of all, Mac Jones is significantly better than Cam Newton. Well, Cam Newton threw 8 touchdowns and 10 interceptions in 15 starts last year. Like running the ball, Cam Newton, sure. But as terms of a passer, Mac Jones is significantly better, I think. I talked about this in our roundtable that's up at actionnetwork.com right now. But one area I really think Mac Jones will help the Patriots in the passing game is the play action game. Because remember, the Patriots do want to kind of lean on the run. They have a good defense. They'll have Damian Harris, who's not a big pass catcher, but the play fake could be really effective, going to him. And Mac Jones was, top 5 percentile in college in play action yards per attempt. And then this preseason, he went 10 of 12 for 148 yards on play action. That's 12.3 yards per attempt. And he had a PFF grade in the top 3 out of 100 passers who threw at least one play action throw. So I think that's going to be a massive improvement. Cam was 29th in play action yards per attempt, and only 5 quarterbacks last year actually had more interceptions than touchdowns on play action, and Cam was one of them. So I think that's going to be big. And I think I actually do like Jacoby Myers for the Patriots. I have him as a kind of low end wide receiver 4, and you can usually get him for free or as like a wide receiver 5-6. He averaged over 5 catches over the last 11 games last season, even with Cam Newton in there. And I think, with a guy like Mac Jones, which is going to get the ball out quick, deliver accurate balls, in stride to receivers, I think that really benefits a guy like Jacoby Myers, who's shown he can be a volume guy already. And then Aguilar is still going to be the lower percentage route runner. Like he's gotten really good on those, deep kind of routes, and he can take advantage of some of those on play action as well. But I do think this significantly boosts Myers. So I have him, just inside the top 50 for the Patriots. And then where do you have Mac Jones? Just curious. I have him, I think QB 29 or 30, right around there.
Right around there. QB 28. I wouldn't take him over like a Zach Wilson, who I have right around there. I think Zach Wilson has way more upside. I think Mac Jones, like I said, he's not a fancy asset himself, but he does make everybody else around him better. And not to defend Cam Newton too much here, but I think 2021 Cam Newton was going to be better than 2020 Cam Newton, because if you remember projecting this team last year, they really had nobody out of Jacoby Myers for some time. Like Demary Bird was out there running wind sprints. I don't remember projecting a tight end for over 1 catch at all last year.
Yeah. Dalton Keene and Devin Asiasi broke my target per route run model. It was just like 0 targets on infinite routes.
Ryan Izzo was the only guy who's projecting like over a half a catch a game. So, just a significantly better just receiving core. So I think Mac Jones will help unlock that. But he himself, he doesn't have the rushing upside. This isn't going to be like a super high scoring offense. So I think he specifically is just a deeper 2 QB super flex kind of bench stash kind of guy.
Yeah, he's a nice cheap guy in a best ball, especially if you go at like Fields or Lance and you're not guaranteed 16 starts.
Yeah,
you can get a guy like Mac Jones as your QB3, and you should get those 16 starts barring injury. But yeah, he would have to. He has the upside. There's a lot of uncertainty, but he would have to be like one of the most efficient pocket passers to even sniff the top 12. So
he could be, but that's why he's cheap enough where you're going to get that upside if he hits anyway. But like you said, he does have a high floor because I'm projecting him for 16 and a half starts. He's not going to lose the job now. So.
Yep. And I agree with the tight end. It's hard to pick between them, but they both did move up a couple ticks in my ranks just because Cam Newton, you figure the Patriots won't run more than they passed this year, which they did with Newton. So, everything's going up. You got more team pass attempts, more passing efficiency. So I think Jonnu and Hunter Henry, they're kind of mid to high end tight end 2s now. I think before they were mid to low for me. So everyone's kind of moving up.
The tight end 2s are getting hurt, so they've been.
Pour one out for our guy Irv Smith. Man, looks like he's going to miss the season. Yeah. But we'll talk more about that. Yeah. I just wanted to jump right in on the Patriots because that's been kind of the biggest news as we record this on Wednesday. Let's go to the Buffalo Bills, and my biggest question, because I've gone back and forth on this, and just little tweaks to these projections can shift things dramatically here. But who do you think is the best value at ADP among the 3 wide receivers after Diggs? Is it Cole Beasley? Is it Gabriel Davis? Or is it Emmanuel Sanders for you?
I think it depends on your league and sort of where you're at later in the draft. If you're in a deeper league, like PPR format, where you start, 4 to 5 wide receivers, Cole Beasley is definitely the better value because he has such a high floor. Now his ceiling may be capped a bit. He's not like a touchdown scoring kind of guy. So I think Gabe Davis, you're probably getting the most bang for your buck at wide receiver 63 in most formats. That's the range where I typically go for upside, and that's what he provides. He could make a pretty big year two leap. He could start the season sort of sharing snaps, targets with Emmanuel Sanders, but I think by the end of the year, Gabe Davis will be the wide receiver 3. So I think in this range, I would say Gabe Davis. But again, I think Cole Beasley, especially at wide receiver 60 in ADP, definitely has the most value because of his floor, but it depends on your draft strategy.
Yeah. The reason I ask is because Gabe Davis in PPR formats generally comes out ranked the lowest, but I would still recommend taking him the most because I think he has the most upside. Remember, you're talking about a potential year 2 breakout candidate, not like a super late round pick. Like he was a middle round pick. I think he went in the 4th round, 3rd or 4th. I
think
remember.
4th. Yeah.
Yeah. In the 4th. Right. So he's not like a super late round pick that, just lucked into some playing time last year. He's a legitimate guy that they had plans, they had legit plans for him. And he ran 71. He played 71% of the snaps last year. John Brown was in and out of the lineup, but look at Emmanuel Sanders. He kind of profiles as the same type of player who could miss a little more time than your average player. Remember, he had the injury a couple years ago and, getting older is 34. So I think Davis is still the guy for me. I do worry a little bit about this receiving room, though, with the unvaccinated Cole Beasley in there. Because, this is something like we have to kind of be, obviously,
definitely
it's
a
not
factor.
It's no laughing matter, and it's a personal choice. I'm not judging any of the players, but I'm kind of on the Urban Meyer side when it comes to managing my fantasy rosters. Like I'm going to factor in these vaccinations. That might dock like a couple tenths of a projected game from, some of these teams with the low vaccination rates. I think the Bills, the Titans are one, the Colts. And it also just makes the AFC South really interesting. But just kind of wanted to talk those receivers for Buffalo. I think that's the big question. We know what we're getting with Josh Allen. We know what we're getting with Diggs, and we know Singletary and Moss are going to kind of still form a committee. They'll give you pretty solid RB3-ish flex value most weeks, but hard to predict which one will go off when. So the receivers is the toughest question for me there. So let's go on to the Miami Dolphins. And this team is another interesting team because no player for the Miami Dolphins gets drafted in the high leverage rounds. You have Gaskin and Gesicki and Waddle and Parker and Fuller, and they all go round 6 or later. Like maybe Myles Gaskin sneaks into the top 5 rounds. Maybe he goes around 6, but usually these guys are all, mid to late round picks. But you said yourself, you really like the prospects of Tua Tagovailoa in year 2. So I'm curious as to when you look at your rankings and kind of look at where these guys are going, is this offense as a whole undervalued, or are you targeting any specific players?
Yeah, it probably is undervalued, but for good reason because it's so crowded. It's really hard to decipher between Jalen Waddle, Will Fuller, and Devonte Parker, all in that wide receiver 40 to 50 range. I would think out of those 3, Will Fuller offers the most upside. And again, this is the range where you're probably drafting your first bench slot. So why not shoot for the moon like a Will Fuller? The fact that he's suspended week 1 really doesn't matter if he was going to be on your bench anyway. So I would go for Will Fuller out of these 3. Obviously, Jalen Waddle has a ton of upside as a rookie. And Devonte Parker might have the higher floor, but he's probably not going to win your league. But again, I think you could pick on any of these guys. They're all pretty cheap. They definitely need Tua to have a year 2 leap. It's not going to be possible for him to sustain too many fancy relevant players if he plays similar to the way he did last year. I'm very bullish on Tua, so I'm okay targeting these guys. Even like Mike Gesicki at the end of the tight end 1 tier. I think if you punt at tight end and he's there later, you can take a flyer on him. But, they might be a little bit inconsistent week to week because there are so many weapons on this offense. But I think in general, it's smart to just take, one flyer on a Dolphins pass catcher, just to see if they hit, because they're all like you said, they're all pretty cheap, and you usually stash them on your bench. So they probably need one player to kind of get hurt to open up targets, but I think they are worth investing in.
Yeah, Gesicki's been climbing up my ranks too, because he still projects as one of those tight ends that should be on the higher end of the league in routes run per game. He was around 72% of the routes per drop back last year, and I don't see any reason for that to change. So I still like him. I think Waddle actually has the most upside because he could give you one more game than Fuller of wide receiver potential. Like there's potential like wide receiver 2-1 production out of Waddle, because he's an unknown. But in that part of the draft, like once you've drafted like your top 3 receivers and you're going for a little bit more upside, I don't think that matters too much. So I like Fuller too. Parker's a guy I would rank the lowest because, number one, there's been an infusion of talent on this team and with Waddle and Fuller. And so Parker's going to be that, I would think, is going to be that X and kind of tethered to the line of scrimmage, where you have like a guy like Waddle who's going to move around and get open, and a guy like Fuller who I think is going to, I think he also gets more separation than a guy like Parker. So I would say Parker has the most downside just based on how I think the routes will play out. If these guys are all running routes at the same time at full health. So
yeah, and hopefully guys like Albert Wilson or Preston Williams don't kind of sneak into the rotation and mess this all up. I'm expecting these 3 receivers to dominate, but you never know. There was some buzz about Albert Wilson potentially, having some playing time, but I think he got banged up a bit. So, per usual. Yeah, but he would be such a target hog. You wouldn't draft him, but he would kind of ruin one of these receivers' value week to week and make it messy. But I think the 3 receivers we talked about should be playing most of the snaps. So that's why I think, again, they might not be consistent, but they're going to give you enough good weeks to be worth it at ADP.
Yeah, and I think the way it kind of shakes out now is Wilson would kind of be Waddle's direct backup. I think he'll still get some snaps. He put some stress on the defense. You could put him in motion. And then I think Williams profiles as Parker's direct backup, or both Fuller and Parker's direct backup. So I think that's how it will end up going. But yeah, I like Waddle, like Fuller. I think both of those guys are cheap enough to justify the cost. Let's go to the New York Jets. And this is obviously the team projected to be the worst in this division. So my question is this: who's the best fantasy value on this team, do you think? Is it Corey Davis going in that wide receiver 4 range, or Elijah Moore, the rookie, also going in that range? Jamison Crowder, you can get pretty late. Michael Carter is in that, RB3 ADP range. Kevin Coleman, Ty Johnson also will mix in. And then, of course, Zach Wilson, you can get, as a low-end QB2. So who do you think is the best value for this team?
It's tough because I think Corey Davis used to be the best value. I think he was being drafted around like wide receiver 50. You actually started calling him out pretty early in the offseason. Now it's all the way up to wide receiver 40. That's about where he should be. But Zach Wilson does look really good. So I think this is a passing offense we shouldn't ignore. So that's why I think Elijah Moore at wide receiver 55 is his current ADP. I think he's probably the best bet at ADP. Again, this is the range where he's going to be on your bench anyway. So why not shoot for the upside? I'm very bullish on him as a rookie. I think he's going to hit the ground running. He could end up being Zach Wilson's favorite target. We'll see. Corey Davis is going to draw, usually the top cornerback, the attention from the defense. So Elijah Moore could benefit. And I think, the injury that Moore dealt with in camp sort of kept his ADP in check. We didn't get to see those highlights in the preseason I thought we were going to get. So I think Moore is still a little bit under the radar. So that's why I think he's the best value right now.
Yeah, for me, it's a tie between Corey Davis and Moore. I'm still not going to write off Corey Davis because he's still going outside that top. You don't have to draft him as a top 3 starter receiver on your fantasy team. And I always kind of target those guys in that wide receiver 4 range who could end up being the air yard leader for their team. And Corey Davis, even if Elijah Moore actually gets more targets, I have Elijah Moore projected for a little bit lower of an ADOT. I know he's making strides as an outside receiver, but he's kind of a guy that, should run routes a little closer to the line of scrimmage. He's played a lot of slot in school. I think he will play on the outside because the Jets also have Crowder. But Corey Davis, remember that one year in Tennessee? I think it was year 2 for him when he had like a 40% air yard share because they had nobody else. I mean, that's kind of the ceiling for Corey Davis this year with Zach Wilson, who can get the ball down the field. So now I don't think they'll have much time to throw. So that is a benefit to more because the Jets O-line, I mean, it's one of those O-lines that's right up there with the Giants, I think is as shaky, outside of Becton. But I like Davis and I like Moore. Davis is my wide receiver 40 right now. So yeah, like you said, right on the ADP. But because Moore has the low ADOT, I still have him as wide receiver 64. So I still, and kind of the uncertainty with, is how many snaps is Crowder going to get? Are Mims and Cole going to factor in? They should be a 4-wide team though, after they released every single tight end they had.
Seriously.
Tyler Kroft.
What is up with that? Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I was really surprised that they let Kenny Yeboah go through waivers after he had that big game in the last preseason game. I thought they were just going to straight up trade or cut Herndon and keep Yeboah and Kroft and do it that way. But we'll see if I don't know if he's been re-signed to the practice squad yet or what, but I think Elijah Moore, he's kind of on that, like if there's 64, every team's top 2 receivers, he's right at the bottom of that for me, just because there's a little bit of uncertainty, but his ceiling is so high and you're at that pick range, you can afford the risk. So it's a tie between Davis and Moore for me. And I still love Michael Carter. I still think he emerges as
I was going to ask, are you nervous at all? Like it's still sort of, they cut Josh Adams, which, removes one player from this.
They were never going to keep 5 back.
Obviously, Carter is Carter's the most talented back, but still a 4-way sort of timeshare on a bad team with a bad O-line. Like, should he be going wide receiver, running back 35?
I think so. So one thing I did was in preparation for, this pod and just kind of the final rankings and getting ready for the season was I went back to my 2020 spreadsheet and for rankings, my projections. And I kind of just did an audit and highlighted every guy that I was either too high on or too low on, significantly so that it would have an impact in fantasy for people, drafting off the rankings. And one of the, for guys I was too low on at running back, one of the major factors was like 38% of all running backs like that I kind of missed on because I was too low. It was because they were, either a rookie or a year 2 guy in a backfield with, some other veterans that, it looked crowded at the time, but the rookie generally is going to rise to the top. I mean, remember starting last year, it was like, okay, Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack are going to split snaps and you still have Nyheim Hines. It was, DeAndre Swift and Adrian Peterson and Kerryon Johnson. Yeah. And all these guys kind of rise to the cream rises to the top eventually. This is Robert Saleh's first go around. So he's going to give some carries to Tevin Coleman, his old friend from San Fran. And I'm sure Ty Johnson will probably end up as a number 2 in the long term because he's better than Coleman, I think so. But Carter, I mean, he's still the best one. So
his value is only going to go up.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I kind of, it's like year 2 receivers and rookie receivers to an extent, just because of their ADPs outside the ones that go in the first round of the real draft. Like those are the most bankable assets in fantasy that you can kind of really beat ADP with: rookie running backs and year 2 wide receivers. So I don't mind taking, Javonte Williams, Trey Sermon, Michael Carter at whatever their different prices are, because I feel like the value is only going to go up. It's going to be tough for them to really kill me at their ADPs. At worst, they'll kind of be like in a committee and hit value or fall no worse than like running back 3, which you'll deal with that floor when you're taking them as a running back, 2 or 3 anyway. So
So I mean, if you're listening right now and you take Michael Carter and he stinks the first couple weeks, which could happen, don't drop him. Keep him.
Remember, it's not exact apples to apples, but I will say this. Heading into week 1 last season, even after like a couple weeks last season, Justin Jefferson was splitting snaps on a low volume pass offense with Olabisi Johnson.
Oh God.
Justin Jefferson ended up with 1,400 yards. Like that's what I say, that the cream will rise to the top. And that's going to kind of be a theme for me with, guys I'm high on is just young guys who you're kind of looking at the depth chart in week 1 and you're saying, okay, I kind of have to split these snaps up in my projections because I don't know exactly who is going to rise to the top. And generally the answer is the younger guy, the rookie or the year 2 guy, the guy with more talent, whatever it is, even if he's behind another guy in the depth chart, you have to be thinking season-long projections with these. And yeah, it's a great point. If you should be willing for these high upside guys to keep them on your bench for a few weeks. Obviously, depending on your roster size and what happens with injuries, you might have to give up a couple guys. But I would treat it just like these teams are treating these roster cuts. Like if you need to stash a guy, do what you have to do to stash a guy and don't give up after a week. Because you should be drafting good starters. If you're listening to this podcast, your starters should be good. So ideally, we might have a whiff here and there, but hopefully we're plus EV on the season. So let's keep it going here with the AFC North, and let's start in Baltimore because J.K. Dobbins goes down. I was lucky enough to be on the clock in our best ball charity league around the time, so I gobbled up Tyson Williams, who could very well inherit the Gus Edwards role. Well, Edwards inherits the Dobbins role. Mm-hmm. All the reports out of camp have been that Justice Hill has been leapfrogged by Williams even before this, Dobbins news, which kind of warrants the runner more than the receiver, which is a Justice Hill. So I don't know. I like Williams as a deep sleeper. But where do you have Gus? I guess is my big question.
Yeah, so I have Gus up to RB21 right now.
Ooh, I think that's even higher than I thought. I was high on him.
Oh yeah, no, I beat you probably. And that's honestly like his ceiling. I don't think he can go too much higher. Unless you really do think he's going to inherit the Dobbins role. I just don't think
I do. What else could he why else? I mean, I don't mean the Dobbins role of like catcher, what we were projecting. Oh, I mean, yeah, he will. I think that's where they'll kind of split it up between him, Williams, Hill. But in terms of carries, I have him pretty much inheriting. I have him 13 carries a game. Yeah,
no, that's why I have him RB21. I think he's a good bet for a 1,000-yard rush season with 8 to 10 rushing scores. So, his ceiling will be dictated by how involved they'll get him in, the passing game. But I think he's a safe bet. You could probably get him RB23 to RB25 right now, I would assume. So he's a pretty good RB2, RB3 kind of guy. Obviously, he takes a hit in any sort of PPR format. But yeah, I'm with you on Williams as being a high upside backup. Like, this is the Ravens, so we're very interested in the backup running backs. I mean, even if Edwards were to stay healthy, like you said, Williams could carve out an every week role and provide flex value at times. But Justice Hill is still there. He could eat into that a bit, but I think either one, if you're desperate for a high upside flyer, can't go wrong with either. Because again, this Ravens team, even though they're talking about throwing the ball more, they're definitely going to be probably the most run heavy team in the league. So we're definitely interested in these running backs. And Edwards, I mean, I got him. I was getting him when he was RB40.
Oh yeah.
Honest. But now I'm in draft still. I think he's still being underrated a bit just because I think he has such a high floor. So I love getting Edwards.
Yeah, I have a ton of Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. I mean, and James Robinson in best ball. So
wow.
That's worked out just pure luck. But this is why you draft these kind of guys.
Yeah, and to be honest, as a fan, I would have loved to have seen J.K. Dobbins and Travis Etienne play this year.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, it's unfortunate. But yeah, Edwards always had that sort of upside, even if Dobbins is healthy. So now that Dobbins is out, I mean, this is basically his backfield now.
Yeah, I have him RB21 in standard, 23.5 PPR, 25 in PPR. So you do see the progressive downgrade in PPR formats, and that's because he averages only about 9% targets per route run. So even if he's on the field and is not pass blocking, they let him run some routes. Lamar is usually not looking for the backs out there. Although, I mean, he hasn't practiced with any of his receivers except like James Prochet. So, who knows where he's going to look this year. So the passing game is, and I do want to quickly talk about the passing game before we move on, because I mean, my Marquis Brown rankings, I feel like have jumped all over the map. He's been out. But he seems like he could be a target hog if he's just healthy, along with Andrews. But he hasn't been practicing, so I have him 48th in half PPR. I have him missing an extra half a game compared to the normal receivers I give 16. I have Brown at 15 and a half. Where are you on Brown in particular?
Oh, Marquise Brown. He should be good to go for week 1. So I've boosted him back up. He dropped all the way down to like wide receiver 50, I think it was, when he was questionable. Now he's back up to wide receiver 44. Okay. For me, I think his upside is worth taking at that range. Bateman is supposed to miss like the first month, right? So I think that as long as Sammy Watkins is healthy and Brown can have some other wide receiver to kind of take some of the coverage away, I think it's going to help Brown. But this passing offense in general, I'm less bullish on than I was, say, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Because of all the injuries and the lack of practice time. Like, they'll probably get off to a slow start, but we'll see. By the fantasy playoffs, this offense could be in rhythm, and guys like Bateman could still break out later in the season. So I wouldn't count a guy like Lamar Jackson out quite yet from having like an overall QB1 season. If anything, if he runs more to begin the season, he's gonna have pretty big weeks. But this passing offense should get better as the season goes on.
Yeah, and I don't mind drafting Brown because at least get Vegas week 1. So they might start hot. Even though I'm totally with you, I think I am concerned about the lack of time that Lamar has had with his pass catchers, because Lamar, I think, needs that time. He still has ways to go as a passer to truly unlock his upside. Let's go to the Cleveland Browns. I think the big question here is how confident we are in Odell Beckham Jr., because you don't like to put the injury-prone label on guys, especially non-running backs. It's just so hard to predict. But Odell has missed time pretty consistently in most of these last few seasons, except one. So I have him wide receiver 27 in half PPR right now. Where are you on OBJ?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I have him wide receiver 26. So I think, the fact that he's being drafted like wide receiver 30 in that range, we don't have to be that confident with him. Like, he does have that upside to be, potential wide receiver 1, probably not in this offense. But it's there. And yeah, he's dealt with injuries the past couple seasons, but he was playing through injury. I think it was 2019. He was playing through hernia. He's, for all we know, 100% entering this year. So maybe, we haven't seen him play at 100% for a few seasons. So I do like taking Beckham in this range, especially when you consider, a guy like Kenny Golladay is going this range. We don't even know if he's healthy. There's a little bit more risk with these other receivers where I don't think Beckham is that risky at all, because we know what we're going to get. He's sort of the play action and deep threat in this offense. So he's going to have some big games. Yes, he might be inconsistent, but again, in this wide receiver 30 range, we're not asking for every week wide receiver 1 output from him. So I think just given his upside, he's worth taking a flyer on in this range.
Yeah, and remember, this is the first full year, if he stays healthy, that we're going to see him in this Stefanski offense as opposed to the Freddie Kitchens offense. And I thought Stefanski did a good job of keeping Odell involved. And I went back and watched him, over those first 6 games last year, and he looked good. He looked explosive. He was involved in the offense. I mean, he had 10 targets in week 1 of last year. Unfortunately, they came against Baltimore, so it didn't turn into much. The next week, he goes 474 with a touchdown, 4 for 59. Then he has the big game against Dallas with the 81 yards and 2 touchdowns receiving, and another 73 yards on the ground in a touchdown. So, I mean, he has that 81 yard receiving, 73 on the ground, and 3 combined touchdowns. Like, that's the kind of upside you're getting with Odell Beckham, still a talented player. So I've been getting a lot of him too, because I do have him a little bit higher than ADP. Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think we've kind of settled on the fact that Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, and Juju Smith-Schuster are all kind of wide receiver, wide receiver 2s. Some Juju, I think, goes as a wide receiver 3-4 sometimes. So I do get a lot of him, but I think the bigger question is, given we have never seen him on an NFL field or, in a regular season, is Najee Harris. What kind of workload do you think he ends up with, and where does that put him in your ranks?
I mean, he'll be the true workhorse back. The only concern with him is the offensive line. And I think, if he were to struggle due to that, they might throw to him even more. So I think he has a very safe floor. Like, they're going to use him no matter what. So he's a high end RB2. Like, he's the top RB2. I have him just behind the tier with like Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon, Antonio Gibson. I think once those guys are off the board, you definitely want to target Harris. I wouldn't really consider him over those guys. I think they do have a higher ceiling, but we're in the range where volume is king for running back, and he's going to be a king. I don't see how they give Benny Snell or McFarland. I think McFarland got hurt, but
he should start the year on short-term IR.
Yeah, so I mean, this is Najee Harris's backfield, and I'm pretty bullish on the Steelers' offense this year, despite the O-line. So I think he'll benefit from that. Score some goal line scores. So yeah, I think he's a high end RB2.
Yeah, I actually have him 12th. So I have him as a low end RB1, right on that borderline. I would take him over any of those guys. I have him ahead of Gibson, actually, because I think he does have a higher ceiling, because I think he can be a 25 touch guy. I don't think they need Gibson to be that guy in Washington, because you have McKissick, he's going to take routes. And you have Jarrett Patterson, who they like a lot. So I think like Mixon and Harris, people I think are a little worried about because of the O-lines, which is justifiable. But these guys have legit like 20 plus touch per week upside that I think, when you start getting into like a Gibson or Edwards-Helaire, like that, it's there, but it's not, I don't think it's as high in terms of the ceiling. So I like Najee Harris a lot.
Wait, Peyton Barber getting cut by Washington didn't boost your rushing touchdowns for Antonio Gibson?
No, because I already had Barber getting like, that half carry per game or something. Yeah. So it really just boosted up Jarrett Patterson even more, who I love as a deep sleeper, because if Gibson gets hurt, I think it's straight to Patterson, not to McKissick, or they would have just, they would have kept Barber if they were concerned, if they didn't want a complete back like that. So, but
yeah, that was more of a joke for, what's your rushing touchdown projection for Gibson? I just think he's a legit goal line back. So that's why I probably have him over Harris.
Let's see. So I have Harris with 7.1 rushing touchdowns. Gibson, I have at 8.4. So yeah, I do have Gibson with about a 1.3 more touchdowns on about 15 to 20 less carries. So yeah, I respect Gibson's touchdown upside. I just think, we're looking at ceilings here, and I think Harris could be that Le'Veon Bell type workload, whereas Gibson, you're still going to get some McKissick, and if there's an injury, I think Patterson's still looming. So. That's all. Like, nothing against Gibson. Like this is just a tier. It's just a tier of guys.
Exactly. We're nitpicking like 2 fantasy points here, but I think Gibson's upside is if a McKissick goes down. I mean, we know Gibson could be a pass catching back. He's a converted wide receiver. So I think his upside is, we've heard a potential like poor man CMC. That's where I think the upside's coming in for my angle, is like his receiving usage could go up. That's the only thing missing from his game, but Harris is already the workhorse back. So I agree that he does have a massive ceiling. If the Steelers offense scores a ton of points this year, Harris will be an RB1. So
yeah, I'm kind of at the point with the Steelers that I don't think it can be any worse than last year. You pointed out, as a lot of people have kind of seen now, that Ben Roethlisberger looks a lot better in terms of the arm strength, and that's going to be hugely beneficial to everything the Steelers are trying to do. And they were still a pretty profitable fantasy offense last year. I mean, Ben threw 33 touchdowns. Yeah. They just, they couldn't punch it in around the goal line, but that's why they went out and get a guy like Najee Harris, a big guy who, can run even without perfect conditions, because he can get yardage after first contact. That's what's key. That's what he did in school. So I trust Najee. I think the only thing that can go wrong is an injury. I think he's going to be a huge workhorse. So I don't kind of knock him compared to some of those other guys. But let's go to the Cincinnati Bengals, the team of the hats.
Yes.
that we both copped. I didn't know you had this hat either. Like I copped it a few days ago. I still got all the stickers on it.
Nice. Leave them on.
That's kind of how we do in New York. Some people make fun of it, or they make fun because we got the flat brims instead of, curving it like you always say, like the dad hats. But this is what we do in New York, man. So, and I know this is what you do out here too.
Yes.
So, don't knock it, man. Trying to stay fresh over here.
Leave those stickers on until Chase scores his first touchdown.
So the only reason that I ever take stickers off is because it depends on the hat. But sometimes if you leave it on too long and then it does come off or it does get messed up, so you have to take it off, it has that little circle. You know what I mean? Because I am careful depending on the color of the hat. And I kind of have a feel for it of which stickers I just want to take off immediately so I don't get that, discoloration.
Yeah.
The little tan line or whatever you want to call it. But I like leaving them on. I usually just buy a new hat if the stickers.
That's true. I usually just rip them off immediately. But
that's a smart play to completely avoid the tan line.
Yeah.
But Jamar Chase. I think that's the interesting question, and I'll pose it to you this way: Jamar Chase or Tyler Boyd? Jamar Chase goes in the wide receiver 2 range. Tyler Boyd usually can be had as a wide receiver 3 or 4 in ADP. Who's the better value?
Well, considering Jamar Chase's ADP has slipped quite a bit, I think he's all the way down to wide receiver 28. I would still go with Chase. I think Tyler Boyd probably has a higher floor, especially to begin the season. I think Tyler Boyd may outscore Chase the first few games. But, I'm interested in winning my fantasy football league, and I think Jamar Chase will be a wide receiver 2 come fantasy playoff time. So that's why I think Chase is the better value. He's dropped his last 4 passes in the preseason. He's looked a little bit rusty. He sat out the entire 2020 season. He's going to be a bit rusty. I kind of anticipated that. So that's what I'm saying is his ADP has dropped because of the struggles, but I kind of anticipated those. So I'm still on board Jamar Chase. I have him ranked wide receiver 24 right now. Higgins is just ahead of him, but Boyd's the kind of guy where he's high floor guy. He probably won't win your league. So that's why I'm more interested in Chase.
Yeah, I have Higgins wide receiver 20, Chase wide receiver 30, Boyd 37. So given ADP, my guy is actually, I know I didn't put Higgins in the conversation, but Higgins is actually the guy for me. I think he has the best chance of winning your league. Number one, because he's just farther along. He has that extra year of chemistry with Burrow. And I think he's everything that we want Chase to be already, to the point where you talk about a guy that, we think of Chase, okay, first rounder, put up huge numbers in college. So, he has that wide receiver 1 upside. So does Higgins. So does Higgins, and he's more established and hasn't been dropping passes all crazy. And, Tyler Boyd, I do agree. I think pretty much a PPR guy for me. He's 32nd in full PPR for me. And I think that's very valuable because week in, week out, you should count on him to run 80+% of the routes and catch, 4 or 5 balls, which is very valuable when you have to choose a starting lineup. In best ball, that's where I think if you want to target Chase instead of the safer guy in Boyd, I think that's where you do it. But I'm just saying, please draft T. Higgins over Jamar Chase. That's the one that I don't think is the plus EV move, is drafting Chase when Higgins is still on the board. That's what I haven't done at all this entire draft season.
You didn't give me the choice, but I agree with you that T. Higgins is the best value out of the 3.
And I will say that upon your tip, I went and raised up CJ Uzoma to the TE1 because I had him splitting because I just didn't know what was going on there in Cincy. But I have looked into it, and it does appear that Uzoma is going to be the starter. He had good chemistry with Burrow, so I raised him up to being the clear tight end 1 with Sample the clear tight end 2. So Uzoma is actually my tight end 26 now. So you're in a 2 tight end league or a deep deep best ball, whatever. He's viable at the end there,
I'm glad you finally came around to Uzoma. You're not projecting him for over 50 receptions, are you?
I read that article too. Talking about the one in the Athletic. Well, they want 5 guys to have 50 plus or something like that.
Yeah, they threw him in there. He's not quite there for me, but I'm curious where you have him.
I have him 55% of the routes per game. On the season, 41 catches on 58 targets for 410 yards.
I have 41 catches as well. That can wrap up our CJ Uzomah discussion.
Yeah, I mean, no, we have the Bengals hats on, so we got to go through. Matter of fact,
yes, that's true.
I will say this: deep sleeper, PPR sleeper. I know if we had the sleepers pod, I think I chose Boston Scott. I'd probably go Kenny Gainwell now over him because I think he's kind of emerged and he's, the rookie. But I will say this: if there's anyone that could pop out of nowhere and have like a JD McKissick, just bunch of receptions out of the blue, Chris Evans, the number 2 back on the Bengals. He's a rookie. He's going to play that Gio Bernard role. It looks like they released Puka Williams, another guy that potentially could have factored into that backfield. They still have Pirine, but he's not really a great pass catching back. You find with giving him some carries, he can run inside the tackles, but Evans could be that, satellite back that you get for free and could keep you afloat on some tough bye weeks or injury weeks. So I have him running back 63 in half PPR, 57 in full PPR. So, if you're in a league that's 12 teams deep and you're drafting, 5-6 running backs, I think he's worth a pick, and he's not usually getting picked. So
yeah, love that call. And I'll throw it, since we're both wearing Bengals hats, I'll throw out my sleeper pick on this team, and that's Auden Tate at wide receiver. I mean, if either Boyd, Higgins, or Chase goes down, he could be an 80% snaps a game kind of guy. This offense is sort of designed off of the McVay scheme, and I always loved rostering Josh Reynolds late in drafts because, if either Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, or Brandon Cooks went down, Josh Reynolds had some wide receiver 3 value. So that's why Auden Tate, I think, is in a deeper league, a good bench stash, because any one of these guys go down and he could potentially be like a wide receiver 4 flex kind of guy. So he's my sleeper.
What do you have Mixon? I have him RB11. I seem to be higher than consensus. Where are you?
Yeah, I think I have him number 10.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm very high on Mixon. So he's got to stay healthy. But if he does, watch out.
Yeah, Gio Bernard got like 4 carries combined in the first 5 games where Mixon was healthy. Yeah. So, I mean, Evans would be even higher if Mixon wasn't getting such a huge carry share, but they're going to feed this guy as long as he's on the field. So I think Mixon goes a little bit too low, or he's just like, people kind of hate on him compared to some of those other guys. Whereas I think he has a higher ceiling than most. And like, he's no more risky than Saquon Barkley. And yet Barkley usually goes well ahead of him. And I think Mixon, even if they're both healthy, has a decent shot to outscore Barkley. So like Joe Mixon. So I think we've hit on every Bengal. Love Joe Burrow too. If you wait on quarterback, Joe Burrow, love him. Averaged 40.4 attempts per game last season. So yeah, got lots to like with this Bengals offense. They just need to make sure they can protect, and they may not be able to that great, but that'll put them behind the sticks and they'll still get a lot of PPR points. So should be a profitable fantasy offense either way. Speaking of profitable fantasy offenses, the Houston Texans don't look like one. So I want to actually start with them just because my question to you is, will anyone have value on this team?
I think Brandon Cooks certainly has value. He's going to be the number 1 target in this offense, as bad as it will be. I think he has some wide receiver 3 potential. So I do like targeting him at ADP. And then Nico Collins, as the wide receiver 2 in this offense, has value. They're going to have so many trailing game scripts that they're going to have to throw. Tyrod Taylor certainly lowers their ceiling, but you can't go wrong with either one of these guys at ADP, especially after they got rid of Randall Cobb and now they cut Kiki QT. Anthony Miller, who they traded for, is banged up. So I think that, the offense is going to go through these 2 wideouts. So I do think they'll have some fantasy value. Outside of that, I want nothing to do with them. I think you might have a case for Philip Lindsay. I'm out. Jordan Akins, I'm out. Tyrod Taylor, I'm out. I'm just interested in Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins in deeper leagues.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks has some appeal because he could be that air yards leader on his team and by a wide amount. It's frustrating because usually roster cuts are like, yes, we can finally kind of delete the scrubs and finalize our like usage projections for each team. And the Texans are one of the first teams I remember in a long time that roster cut day just made their projections more confusing because they released or cut or like or got a guy hurt at every slot receiver. Every slot receiver they have is somehow not on the roster anymore. They traded Randall Cobb. Miller got hurt. They released QT and they released Alex Erickson. Like they have literally zero slot receivers.
They had Coulter and they had DeAndre Carter. They had at one time they had 8 slot receivers. Now they have 0.
So like who plays the slot? Like what is that? Assuming they don't add, like I think Erickson has his 5 years, so maybe they could bring him back, after they do their injured reserve things. But like assuming they have Cooks, Collins, Conley, and Miller's hurt, and Roberts is, active for return duties. Who starts and is their starting lineup just Cooks, Collins, and Conley with one of those guys in the slot?
Yeah, probably. I mean, Anthony Miller might be available week 1. How about David Johnson? I mean, they seem to have no use for him in the running game. Are they secretly planning to make him the slot receiver? I don't know, but
him or Brevin Jordan, the rookie tight end,
two tight end sets. Guys. 2 tight end sets is certainly an option, but either way, I want nothing to do with whoever this wide receiver 3 is in this offense. But yeah, Nico Collins, I think he could get off to a slow start. I'm not saying draft him necessarily, but keep him on your radar. I think by the end of the season, he should be the number 2 target and definitely has potential to tear it up. So he's the sleeper guy on this team.
Give me your Lindsay, Johnson, Ingram rankings.
Oh God. Probably Lindsay and then Johnson and then Ingram.
But what are their actual, like, what are your, the rankings? I mean, like,
so I have, this is the kind of backfield where rankings don't even matter. Right now I have Lindsay 49, probably worth drafting a little bit higher because he should be the week 1 starter. And then I have Johnson a little bit higher because I think he does have that receiving role locked up. So I have DJ running back 45. And then I have Mark Ingram all the way down at like running back 70. But apparently he's looked good and he's mixing in. So, I mean, if you want to take a flyer on these guys, go for it. But it's a disaster, especially with like Rex Burkhead factored in. You don't want to invest in running backs on bad teams. You don't want to invest in 3 to 4-way running back committees, and the Texans have both. So that's why I'm completely out on these backs.
Yeah, I have Lindsay 46, Ingram 52, Johnson 58. So I have Johnson getting the 3rd most the least carries of the top 3 guys, because that would make sense. And then Culley, he has connections with Ingram because Culley was in Baltimore. So the fact that he brought him over and then looks to be factoring in, I think that, that could play a role here because it's not like anyone's running away with the job. So I agree. I don't think it's a real profitable situation, but there are people in deeper leagues who might need, or you just might need a running back early in the season. Maybe somebody gets hurt. So that's kind of how I have them ranked, but don't feel great anymore about it. Just too much confusion there. Let's go to speaking of confusion, the Colts. T.Y. Hilton has been placed on short-term injured reserve with a neck injury, but you and I were talking before the show. This might not just be, he misses 3 games. This might be he misses that entire, 3 games and then the 3-week window that they have to activate him. So I have T.Y. projected for 10 games. He's outside of my top 80 wide receivers right now. So where are you? Is there any value, I guess, in this pass catching corps? Because you also we don't know what's going on with Carson Wentz. This is this is a team with a low vaccination rate. So, I mean, what are you doing with these Colts?
I think Pittman is still the guy to target. He should be the number 1 option. Certainly could be the red zone threat that, when Wentz is healthy, that he leans on in the red zone. So Pittman's my guy. I think Paris Campbell has a ton of upside. So he's another guy I would target later in the drafts. And then, as always, Zach Pascal will weasel his way into fantasy relevance this year again. Another guy where he could have some touchdown spike games. But either way, I think, Pittman's probably the only guy I'm actively targeting in drafts because he probably will be the number 1 option in this offense. And then the tight end situation is a mess. I'm sort of just avoiding that altogether. But yeah, with everything in flux right now, it's, T.Y. Hilton wouldn't surprise me if he misses more than half the season, which does help, clear up this target share, but it's still messy. So it's just Pittman for me right now.
Yeah. So I know you read the article in The Athletic about the Bengals and how they want to get 50 catches for 5 guys. Did you read the one where the Colts said they don't want to have anyone getting a lot of targets. Like they just want to kind of spread the ball around because.
Well, that sounds about right.
So it's tough.
That's how I'm projecting him. And Mike Strachan.
Oh yeah, he's been flashing.
He was really good in preseason, so he made the team. He may sneak in there, but again, this isn't unless you're in a really, really, really deep league that starts 5 receivers. These aren't really guys you need to be focused on now. Maybe in season, if 1 or 2 of these guys gets hurt, sure. But right now, again, it's really just Pittman or bust for me.
Yeah, same here. And I'm not even that bullish on Pittman. And I love Pittman as a player, but I have him at wide receiver 54 and half PPR.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're not really getting any value because he usually goes a little earlier than that in terms of receiver ADP. So not too much I'm seeing here. Then the rookie Kylan Granson looks like he's going to take the Trey Burton role. So it'll be like a true 3-way committee at tight end. Taylor he's my running back 8. Where you got Taylor?
I have him RB10, but honestly, like 8 to 11, I feel like you can make a case for or against them being ranked in any different order. So he's a guy that I've been moving up a little bit now that it looks like Quentin Nelson is, I think, a lock to play week 1 now. Carson Wentz is trending that direction, so I'm more comfortable taking Taylor, in that range. But again, this is the range where I'll take whoever falls to me. Give me any 4 of these guys in this range, and I'll be fine.
Jacksonville Jaguars. Who's the best receiver value there? Is it Chark, Shenault, or Marvin Jones? They all go in that wide receiver 3 range. I have Chark 34, Shenault 35, Jones 39.
Yeah, I think Chark probably has the higher ceiling, but I'm not getting him as much. And, I was getting Marvin Jones back in like May or June when his ADP was like wide receiver 65. So his ADP is much closer to my rank now, around like wide receiver 48. I would say the guy that I'm the most bullish on is Laviska Shenault, especially after the Travis Etienne injury. They cut Colin Johnson. They cut Philip Dorsett. Not that those guys really.
They probably weren't vaccinated.
Oh, really? Oh,
no. I'm just
I think they
just
were
joking. I don't know.
But they had Tavon Austin and Jamal Agnew, who was a former cornerback.
He's making it. He's going to play. He's going to be active every week.
Yeah, well, they don't have anything behind them. Like the tight ends, it's almost like the Patriots situation for tight end. I can't imagine.
They got Tyron. They just got Tyron Johnson.
Exactly. I was going to say. So now they do have semi-quality wide receiver 4, but either way, I think they're going to just manufacture targets for Shenault.
Yep.
So I love his upside. He's one of those players I think he can make a really big year 2 leap. So despite his ADP being pretty high, and I kind of pegged him as being a sort of a low ceiling player, I've backed off that a bit. I think he does have wide receiver 2 potential if they do manufacture as many targets as I think they will for him. So he's the guy I'm interested in the most out of this trio.
And don't forget, he had 18 carries last year. So it's well within the range of outcomes for him to even get as high as like a Curtis Samuel or a Cordero Patterson, get into that like 30, 40 carry range. And he's very explosive. I mean, I loved him coming out of school. He can take any pass to the house. He looked good in preseason. He looked like a true receiver, not just like a gadget guy. Shenault, it's Shenault for me too. Again, just when in doubt, target these year 2 breakouts because that's where you tend to beat ADP the most. Like, Chark could be a little bit of a value. Jones could be a little bit of a value, but Shenault is the guy who I think really could be a league winner. So he's a guy for me. And then I have, you said you have James Robinson, what, like 12th? I have him RB 16 and half PPR right now. You have him higher, right?
I've been fiddling around with projections, obviously, the past 24 hours, and I think he's in that RB 15 range for me now. Okay. RB 16. So in that Chris Carson,
so we're right there.
Tier,
yeah. I think I have Robinson 1 spot ahead of Carson, but don't mind any of them. If you need to take a running back in that range, I don't tend to do that too much because I really like going wide receiver in rounds 3, 4, 5, almost regardless of what I did in rounds 1 and 2. Like if I got receivers early, then I'm just going 0 running back. If I got 2 running backs early, then great. Then I'll just get my 3 receivers. If I got a stud tight end, then I'll just kind of go hero running back. and take a wait, because I just love the receiver value in 3, 4, 5. So I'm not getting too much Robinson or those guys, but I think he has a high floor and a talented player. So it should get a ton of work. I'm not concerned with Hyde too much being at this stage of his career. Let's go to the Tennessee Titans, and the question for the Titans is Julio Jones. Where are you ending up with him ranked heading into the year?
Yeah, he's really tricky to not project, but to rank, because right now I'm projecting him to miss a half a game more than your average receiver. So most receivers I have projected for 15.9 games, so they're projected to miss.
Is that like 15 divided into 16 times 17?
Not
is sure that how you got to that,
but yeah. So typically it's one game, so they get an additional 0.1. Yes, you're correct.
Yeah, I knew that, Matt. Like this, that's how much I'm like, we're in these spreadsheets all the time. I like, it's like comes naturally to me now. I'm like, oh, Sean has, because I just do 16 straight up, kind of like a median. But like I saw the 15.9 and I'm like, I'm trying, I try to do the math in my head just because that's just what I do. And I was like, oh yeah, I bet it's 15 into 16.
Got me.
Times 17.
And it doesn't matter because it's for everybody.
Yeah.
So for reference, I have Julio Jones at 15.3.
But how do you get to that? Like, how do you do? How do you get to 15.3?
It's more of an art than a science. And I'm trying to get him ranked where I would draft him. That's the ultimate goal, right?
Gotcha.
So, he's been dealing with injuries all camp. He hasn't practiced much. I'm not too worried about that. Whenever he is on the field, I mean, he's elite. My wide receiver 1 projections, he's wide receiver 10. So, I mean, when he's in the lineup, he's going to give you points. So that's why, I would draft him higher than wide receiver 20, because we talk about all the time, it's about usable games. When Julio Jones is out of the lineup, not to play him and you replace him with somebody else. That's sort of valuable, knowing that he's going to provide you really high-end wide receiver 2 value at a cheaper price. So I would probably draft him in the wide receiver 15 to 16 range. That's why I'm saying my projections versus my rank where I draft him is a little bit tricky. I think he's a guy that you're going to draft earlier because he has a higher ceiling. And injuries are not predictable. So I'm not saying he's going to miss.
Well, then you should move him back to 15.9.
Well, then he'll be like wide receiver 9, and that's way too early. So I just think wide receiver 20, that range, if he falls there, I'm taking him every time. But certainly you can take him in the wide receiver 15, 16 range, which I've seen you do. So, yeah. So you're pretty high on him too, right?
I actually have him the same as you, like wide receiver 21. But again, it's all about tiers for me. And I love all of those receivers going in rounds 3 through 5. I don't really discriminate on any of them, except maybe Chase, because I just feel like he goes a little too early. I think it's a better strategy. Just looking back at past history and bust rates and things like that. You're going to get more value, more bang for your buck drafting wide receivers in that range. Because remember, a top 10 running back, we're not even talking top 5, but a top 10 running back, the median ADP that they've been gone by is 19th overall. So, once you get past that, high end RB, that running back 1 tier essentially, which is pretty deep this year, because I think it extends to Mixon and Harris and guys like that. But once you get past those guys, I think you're just really kind of shooting for running back 2 ceilings. Whereas like Julio Jones, as you alluded to, he could be a wide receiver 1 that you're getting at wide receiver 15 to 20. So, like Julio, draft him a ton. Because he does tend to slip to me in the 4th round quite often.
I will say, if you've never owned Julio ever in fantasy, if you don't like headaches, don't draft Julio, because every week he's just a nightmare. He's always questionable, game time decision, and that if he plays, you have to play him. Like, he's sort of difficult to own, but when he does play, he's a slam dunk almost every time. But I will caution people that have never owned him that he is a headache to own.
Yeah, I mean, he's out of Atlanta though, so that he might actually like care more now, because that was his whole thing. He was just like done with the Falcons. He kind of soured on Arthur Blank and everyone. He just never wanted to practice and kind of was like looking out for himself. But maybe you get a better attitude out of Julio. So yeah, like Julio a lot. We're just curious, where do you have Ferkser? I have him at 22. I just don't know if he gets enough snaps because he doesn't block at all to truly be like a difference maker Do you have him higher or lower?
I have him 16.
Okay.
And that's because of the bloodbath happening at tight end right now. So he leapfrogged Troutman, he leapfrogged Irv Smith, obviously. And I think I even bumped Evan Ingram down quite a bit. So he leapfrogged him. So that's why just by default he's moved up to 16. By no means is he a slam dunk, but he is one of my favorite like low end tight end 2 flyers I've been taking, because he is, taking over the Jonnu Smith role apparently. So I just think he does have a higher floor than other guys in this range. But yeah, like he's tight end 16 by default, just for moving up because of these injuries.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he can take over, because the Jonnu Smith role involved a ton of blocking, which I don't. I mean, this guy blocked on like 2% of his route or 3% of his routes in his career. So I think there's a low floor. Like I just don't end up getting him, I guess, is what I'm saying, because he's usually gone like by the time I'm drafting. So yeah, I guess I'm lower on him than consensus. Let's go to the AFC West. We got the Chiefs starting probably McCole Hardman along with, Tyreek Hill, and then, Byron Pringle or Demarcus Robinson will be that number 3. So Hardman, I think, is the tough guy to rank, because you never quite know, is he going to be like a true starting wide receiver, or is he still going to sub out a lot, and, guys like Robinson are going to beat him in routes run. So where do you have Hardman ranked?
Yeah, so he's similar to Julio Jones, where I'd probably draft him higher than where I have him ranked. I think, I have him ranked wide receiver 58 range. But this is the range where you want to go for upside. And he absolutely has that. Like he has wide receiver 3 upside. And if Tyreek Hill were to ever miss time, I think he has wide receiver 2 upside. He's struggled in camp. He's still pretty raw as a receiver, which is disappointing. This, late in his career, he's entering year 3. So I was hoping he'd be a little bit more polished, but you can't deny the upside. And he's one of those guys where if he busts, he's not going to kill you in this range. You're just drafting a guy that's going to be on your bench anyway. So that's why I'm okay drafting him, around the wide receiver 50 range, because for me, it's all about upside and potentially being Patrick Mahomes' number 3 target. That's too good to pass up. So I think he is still worth drafting at ADP.
Yeah, I have him at wide receiver 56, but I'd also take him a little higher than that. Denver. Courtland Sutton looks like he's going to be healthy after all. He played in the preseason. He had been having a rough camp, but I think health is the important thing with him. Jerry Jeudy and Sutton tend to go around somewhat the same time. Jeudy a little bit earlier. He climbs into the low-end wide receiver 2 rank sometimes, but who do you think is a better value at ADP, knowing that Sutton should be on the field week 1? Is it Jeudy or Sutton?
So this is less about like not liking Sutton. I think Sutton's a good receiver. He definitely has a high ceiling, but I've been all about Jerry Jeudy all off season. I was targeting him heavily when he was like wide receiver 37. Now he's all the way up to like you said, like a low end wide receiver 2. I've seen his ADP climb up to about wide receiver 27. And I would still consider him there. I think he's just a massive breakout candidate. Having a year 2 leap. I mean, he was good as a rookie, but he had so many things going against him last year. I already mentioned he had the 13 drops. That's not a sticky stat. I expect him to improve on that. I think having Teddy Bridgewater as quarterback may help, see more catchable passes. He had lousy touchdown luck. He had 0 touchdown receptions on 7 end zone targets. So, he's due for positive regression there. And like I mentioned, the poor quarterback play last year should only get better this year. So I think he will see more catchable balls. That's why I think Judy's just a massive year 2 breakout candidate. And I still like getting him even at wide receiver 27.
Yeah, I have Jeudy at 31 and Sutton at 33. So a lot of the value has kind of been taken out of Jeudy for me, but I do agree. You can't really go wrong targeting, or you go wrong less often than not targeting the year 2 breakouts. Same could be, that was Sutton a couple years ago. But now I think Jeudy has the higher ceiling and Sutton has a lower floor, because you're running routes with a guy like Jeudy who gets probably going to get more separation and get open more. KJ Hamler's a guy who can create some separation. And you're also going to be, we don't know how many pass attempts they're going to have. Vic Fangio, defensive minded coach. They should be really good on defense. So I think Jeudy is definitely the pick for me in those guys. And at running back, I like Javonte Williams. I have him at 24. And I think I've been getting a lot of Gordon too, who I think it's still going to be close to a 50-50 for most of the year. I think, Williams, I do have him getting more usage. That's why I have him up to 24. I think he'll actually play a lot in the pass game. I think they like him there. But I still have Gordon at 33. So essentially like one of the top, RB3s. So just what do you think of Gordon this year?
Yeah, that I would call that a practical pick, which there's nothing wrong with that. You don't like draft Melvin Gordon, show your friends like, hey, look at my team. I got Melvin Gordon, but I'm with you. Like I still have him projected right there at RB30. He's one of those guys that his value will probably peak at the beginning of the season. So if you're hurting at running back and you need like a week 1 to 5 starter, definitely target a guy like Melvin Gordon. He probably won't win your league, but it probably means you're stacked at the other position, so you'll be fine. And then you can stash guys like a Trey Sermon or Michael Carter on your bench in the meantime. But I think, yeah, definitely taking Melvin Gordon can be part of a winning draft strategy.
Yeah, and there's really nothing behind those two guys. So I think the plan is for those guys to split reps all year. That was Philip Lindsay's role last year. It's just that he got hurt so much. But, Gordon would get like 14 carries and Lindsay would get 10. And this should be a run-heavy team, so there should be enough carries to go around. We don't really expect Bridgewater or Locke to run a lot. So I think they're both high floor picks. Don't mind either of them. For the Chargers, I think the interesting question is, Justin Herbert goes ahead of Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Jalen Hurts a lot of the time. Should he be? Because for me, it's no. I love him, but I just think those guys with Brady and Rodgers, like we've seen that elite passing upside. And then with Hurts, he has that like more rushing upside. So it's hard for me to justify Herbert over those three guys. What about you?
Yeah, he's interesting because obviously I think he's, one of the most talented up and coming quarterbacks, but I do agree that his ADP is probably too high. I'm avoiding this tier in most drafts. But you already mentioned, Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, probably they most certainly have a higher floor, but it's not like their ceiling is lower than Herbert. They all kind of have a similar ceiling. So that's why if you're going to go with the QB in this range, why not go with an Aaron Rodgers or even Tom Brady? And then if you're going for just insane ceiling, like QB1 overall ceiling, and willing to take some risk, go with Jalen Hurts. So, Justin Herbert's the kind of guy that doesn't really fit in any of those draft strategies. So I do agree that he's probably being drafted too early.
Yeah, like I don't know if he has like 48 touchdown, 4 interception or whatever it was for Rodgers ceiling. I don't know if he has like Brady, like Peyton Manning second year in Denver ceiling. Yep. And he doesn't have like the 700 plus rushing yard ceiling of Hurts. So it's, if he was going in that range where, okay, whoever falls to me, then I'd be fine with it. Cause I think he's kind of a mix of everything and just a guy that should play well and is a great quarterback. But the fact that he a lot of times goes ahead of those guys, I don't really get too much of him. So, hoping that he doesn't completely go off and destroy that. But I usually do. I'm not avoiding this tier at all because I think there's a bigger drop off after that. Aside from Tannehill, who's pretty underrated, you're talking about a lot of pocket passers or like a really risky rushing guy like Daniel Jones. So, I don't like to let anyone past Hurts go off the board before I've drafted a quarterback. Like I want to have somebody in that top 10. Raiders, Josh Jacobs versus Kenyon Drake. Who's the better value there? Jacobs has been slipping sometimes into the 6th round, but Drake still can be had, 9th, 10th round. Who's the better value?
The better value is probably Kenyon Drake, but it's hard to get too excited over either one. So in those situations, I tend to prefer the guy with the lower ADP. I think Drake could provide, weekly flex RB3 value when we get these heavy bye weeks or, you have injuries on your team. And then he has that RB2 upside if Josh Jacobs were to ever miss time. And, I think he basically robs Jacobs of his RB1 ceiling. So that's why I think Jacobs the kind of guy where if he falls you at the end of the RB2 tier, I'm okay taking him. But he just scares me because, he's limited in the receiving game. Drake might steal some of the goal line work. There's so much uncertainty that in these situations, like I said, I tend to prefer the cheaper guy, and that's Drake here.
Yeah, I actually like Jacobs just given how much he slipped because I don't think much has changed there. I mean, remember, Jacobs was never a pass catching back, and there usually was two running backs. It was usually Richard and like a Booker or a Washington.
Yeah.
Richard is starting the year banged up. He's been getting phased out, so it's probably going to be Drake more so inheriting what used to be kind of split between Richard and another back. I don't think Jacobs' role really changes that much. And he has been an RB1 with the low passing game usage. So I actually think he's a very good value. I still have him ranked right in that middle tier of RB2s at RB15 and half PPR. And that's with not giving him much receiving production at all, because I still think he gets his 16 carries per game. That was his median last year. His average was actually 18.2 per game. So I have some regression there. And he still projects pretty highly. So
you said RB15 and half PPR.
Yep.
Nice. I have him RB18. So yeah, if his ADP's RB20 or if he falls there,
usually does.
You're getting him. Yeah. So that's fine. Who do you have? You obviously have Swift below him. I have
Swift below him. I have him right there with Robinson, kind of tied essentially. And then I think Edwards-Helaire is like right above him. Carson is also right in there in that same range. So
okay,
it's
so
like
you have Carson ahead of Josh.
I think one spot behind him.
Oh, okay.
Oh no, Jacobs Robinson Carson. So yeah.
Oh, okay.
I have, and again, there's essentially tied. It's not like
they're all the same. But I have Carson RB14. That's how much I love him, and that's why I get him in every draft. So.
Oh yeah, I have no problem taking Carson. I just think Jacobs, it's like he projects the same, and yet we're so down on him compared to those other guys.
Can we at least appreciate this RB2 tier? I hate when people call this the dead zone. Last year, this was Todd Gurley, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell. Who else was here? Just, garbage. And this year, I think all these guys have upside. So I'm not calling this the dead zone or the frozen pond.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I think teams are getting smarter too. It just like a lot of those guys they're just not on teams this yeyer, like Adrian Peterson and Gurley. Like it's like these teams just aren't rostering these guys. So that's why I'm saying, like, I think we're overestimating Jacobs' demise. Yeah, the offensive line shouldn't be as good, but the Raiders offense is going to be built around giving Jacobs, 15 plus carries a game. And there's still a lot of work for Drake to be had. So I like him too. I get him a lot. I have him at 37. So I like them, a lot more than the wide receivers. Waller obviously is the tight end too, but I think the running backs in Vegas should be values.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the NFC, and we'll start with Dallas. CeeDee Lamb or Amari for you?
This is so tough because, I don't want to get off the CD train. It's been fun. I drafted a shit ton of him when he was wide receiver 17, but now that he's wide receiver 12 and Amari Cooper's like wide receiver 15, I would prefer Amari because it does look like Amari's healthy. But Lamb's going to have such a big year that you can't go wrong with either. Again, this is one of those things where we're nitpicking, but I have them essentially tied in my rankings. So, give me either. At the end of the day, sorry, I'm scrambling here, but at the end of the day, Michael Gallup at wide receiver 46 is probably the best value out of all of them. So that's why I've typically gotten him in most of my drafts. Whereas these guys, it depends where your draft slot is, depends who you get in round 1 or 2. But I'm okay having either one of these guys on my team.
Yeah, actually funny because I actually have Gallup ranked exactly at wide receiver 46. But I do agree that he's a value given that Dak should be back, and this offense should be able to support the 3 wide receivers. So, but yeah, for Lamb versus Cooper, I have Lamb one spot ahead. But yeah, they're essentially tied. But I think they're both top 12 receivers. So don't think you can go wrong with either one of those guys. Let's go to the Washington football team. Where are you on Curtis Samuel? Because I think Gibson's a known quantity. Logan Thomas is a known quantity, or at least he's kind of locked in that tight end 7 spot. But I think Samuel is a little bit more of a wild card, just given that he's, coming over from the Panthers.
Yeah. And, I have him ranked wide receiver 47 right now. ADP is wide receiver 52. I think the market may be underestimating his 1 to 2 carries per game that I sneak into my projections. But he's not a guy I'm targeting. This is the range. We're shooting for the moon, and he's more of a high floor guy. But even in this offense, I don't know if we could say that. Like you said, they have Logan Thomas, they have Terry McLaurin. I don't know how they're going to use Curtis Samuel in the backfield. They already have Antonio Gibson and JD McKissick, so it's his role may be limited, and he's the kind of guy that sort of needs volume to hit in fantasy. So I just don't know if we're going to get that week to week. So I'm off on him, even though I'm a little bit ahead of ADP. Where are you on him though?
Yeah, I have him at wide receiver 51, so I'm pretty much in line with consensus. He's there for the taking, but I don't see him being a big air yards guy. That's not the best way to use him. So he's going to have to be a big PPR guy, but he's still behind, McLaurin, Thomas, and probably McKissick even for targets. So,
and he missed like most of camp, right?
Yeah.
And preseason. So that's not good when you're in a new, maybe not a new system for him, but new team with a new quarterback. Like that's not good.
Yeah, and he has struggled with injuries at times in his career. So yeah, just not a guy that I think is going to be a league winner. So not getting too much of him. Patterson is really the deep sleeper that I like on this team because I have him, right as borderline, top 60 running back. So I think he deserves to be picked just for his upside and the fact that he showcased so time. And remember, this is the same organization that found, Antonio Gibson, a legit, workhorse back in the middle rounds of the draft. So they kind of turned McKissick, who nobody wanted, into a viable threat. So this is a good organization with Ron Rivera at the helm for unearthing these backs. And he also took Christian McCaffrey. So it's a pretty good track record here. So don't mind a dart throw on Patterson if you're in a deep league, a best ball, going like extreme zero running back and want to benefit from some variance or whatever not. So that's what I'm doing with the football team. The Eagles, it's interesting because they have these guys going in the middle rounds that I don't know. It's just tough to go either to feel like amazing about them or feel like too down on them. But I don't know. Miles Sanders, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. Who's the best value for you of those three guys? I know they're different positions, but that's kind of the point. Like if you're investing in this offense, who's the best value for you?
I don't love any of them, mainly because Jalen Hurts, he robs them of their value because of his rushing ability, his inaccuracy as a passer. So I think Miles Sanders, I'm in line with ADP at least. He's a guy that I don't go into drafts wanting to draft him, but if he were to fall to me at the end of the RB2 tier and, I was busy taking wide receivers and tight ends in the first few rounds, he's a guy that could be part of my draft plan. Devontae Smith, I think, is being drafted a bit too high. And then Dallas Goedert, I mean, I feel like we talk about every pod, but he's a bit risky where he's going. But his ADP has dipped enough to where I think at, tight end 12, I would consider him. I think he is talented enough, even with Zach Ertz still there, to produce value there, especially considering I keep mentioning this tight end 2 tier is collapsing beneath him. So that's kind of raising his value a little bit. But, all these guys, I'm uninterested in. This is an offense where, Jalen Hurts is going to be the fancy asset from this team.
Yeah, I agree. Hurts is really the guy target. Out of those three guys, it's Smith for me, just because you have like some of that unknown giving you that upside. Now, I do agree. I think he's being drafted a little too high, but there's a chance for, the air yard hogging, the target hogging there, and some of the off script plays. And, he's kind of competing at wide receiver. He's competing with Jalen Reagor and Quez Watkins. So he's going to be open. And then, tight ends, as we talked about, they don't really influence, like there's only a few tight ends that really draw that like alpha target share that are going to change, the wide receivers projections. That's a short list. It's like Waller and Kelsey. And so, I think Smith has some upside here, but it really hurts or bust for me when investing into this Eagles offense.
Yep.
The Giants, another team that, aside from Saquon, who we've talked about, probably a little too risky to be a optimal second round pick, given that everybody has ceiling in that range. But outside of him, another team where everyone's going, fifth, sixth round or later, usually Galladay, Shepard, Ingram, who's a little banged up, Slayton. You even got the rookie Tony, Devonte Booker, the Saquon handcuff, Daniel Jones, late round quarterback. Who's the best value outside of Saquon? Like, who do you target? Who would you target if you had to in this offense outside of Saquon?
I mean, it's so crowded that like none of them really, but it leads me to Daniel Jones at QB like 29. For any of these guys to hit, he has to be good. So the answer is Daniel Jones. And I think he still carries that, weekly QB1 upside. So he's more of a best ball sort of target for me. You can get him super late. He's not really a threat to get benched necessarily. So he should play all 17 games as long as he stays healthy. Out of the pass catchers, I would say Sterling Shepard is probably the best target. He's sort of under the radar where he could be the target leader in this offense. Kenny Galladay has missed pretty much all of camp and preseason, so we don't even know if he's healthy. So we've known that Sterling Shepard can be, a target monster when needed. So I think out of all these guys, it would be Shepard for me.
Yeah, Shepard is the pass catcher I get the most of in drafts. He's great in a full PPR, especially. He averaged 5.7 catches per game in 2019, 5.5 last year. That's a lot of catches, and that's with Daniel Jones mostly. So I think Shepard is somewhat of a value. Not going to give you much in the touchdown department, but he does get some rushing attempts. Jones, I do like as a late round quarterback, just more so because of the rushing upside. The passing, it'll land where it lands, but I do have Jones ranked QB 20, which again, he usually goes far later than that. So like him. And then I am starting to take just a little bit of Devonte Booker, because I think it gives you some interesting anti-fragileness with, being down on Saquon. How do you profit off that? Well, you could take the guy that, will be the RB, be their starter if Saquon goes down at essentially for free. And remember, the risks of Saquon apply because he's a first, second round pick. But look at a guy like Wayne Gallman, who you could have got for free last year or picked up on waivers. He gave you in the middle of the season, RB2, high-end RB2 production. So that's kind of the way I like to invest in this team, is go with the guys that you could get for free, Daniel Jones and Booker. The NFC North, we got the Packers. Robert Tunyan kind of came out of nowhere last year, double-digit touchdowns. Where do you have him ranked amidst all this tight end chaos?
So he's tight end 10 right now. And honestly, it's like a 4 to 8 way tie for this massive tier. So he's tight end 10, but again, you can't go wrong if you take him tight end 7. He's a touchdown dependent tight end that should probably score a bunch of touchdowns again this year. So I can't fault you for taking him. He might be a little less consistent than a guy like a Logan Thomas or even a Noah Fant. So that's why I have him tight end 10. But I'm avoiding this tier to begin with. Like I said, once the top 6 tight ends are off the board, I'm basically punting until the end of the draft and just take a flyer on whoever's left. But where do you have Tunyan now?
I have him tight end 9, and I do get some of him because he sometimes falls into that, outside the top 100 picks, and he's still on a short list of tight ends that has 10, 15 touchdown upside. So I don't mind investing in him as long as I don't have to get him above his ADP. I will never take him over a guy like Logan Thomas, because Thomas ran a route on 90% of the dropbacks, and Tunyan was at 65%. So there is a difference there, and that opens you up to, that touchdown variance if Rodgers regresses or whatnot. But I still think the upside is there, and it is enough of a shit show that, Tunyan should be among the top red zone targets and among the top leaders in touchdowns at the position. So the fact that if you can get him as like one of the last people to take your tight end, I don't hate it. I'd rather take him than wait for now that this tier has totally deteriorated. Like I'd rather take him than wait on some. Like a few weeks ago, it was like, okay, there are some guys I can take if I wait, Evan Ingram, but he's gone, or Smith, or he's starting to get hurt, or Smith hurt. Zach Ertz still interesting to me, but there's a lot less guys now. I think that
who's your tight end 10 then? Like who do we have?
I think it's still Goddard. Let me double check that.
So I have Fant, Logan Thomas, and Tyler Higbee ranked above Tunyan. Do you have any of those guys?
No, Fant I have at 8, I believe. So then, but it's neck and neck, and I don't mind taking Tunyan over Fant because I do think Fant. It's year 3. Tight end breakouts happen a little more in year 3 than wide receivers usually year 2 now, just because they get just how the game is going. But tight end is a little tougher, so I do like the talent there. I think it's a little crowded, but I don't mind taking Tunyan just for that touchdown, just chasing that touchdown upside. And he usually is cheaper than Fant, so that's really what it comes down to. Higbee, I think, is he's right there, but I think Stafford benefits the receivers a little more than the tight end in that offense. So, and I think Tunyan has more touchdown upside than Higbee. So
makes sense.
Let's go to talk about the Vikings with Irv Smith, slated to miss time. Where are you ranking Tyra Conklin? Now it looks like Smith's going to be out the entire year. It has like a 4 to 5 month timeline on the meniscus surgery? Yeah.
I guess it was between cleaning it up or doing a full repair, and they went the full repair route. So it's unfortunate he'll miss this season, but he should be 100% next year. So we'll get to see him break out then. I have Tyler Conklin, tight end 27 right now. So he's in that, Blake Jarwin, Eric Ebron, Hayden Hurst. I have Adam Troutman there too. Tier. This is only, deeper tight end premium formats where you need to care about him, but he's clearly the tight end 1. I'm not too concerned about Chris Herndon. Once they made the trade for Chris Herndon, I feared the worst for Irv Smith. So we'll see. Maybe Herndon has some potential with the change of scenery, but I'm avoiding these guys anyway. I think it's just going to be, probably more targets for Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook. So outside of those 3, I want nothing to do with the Vikings. I don't care who the number 3 wide receiver is. I'm trying to figure out who it's going to be. Don't care. It's the 3 main guys for this team or bust for me.
Yeah, I mean, the number 3 receiver will probably be Amir Smith-Marset. He'll also return kicks. I think Osborne has taken some reps there, but Smith-Marset is like in a super deep league. He does have some upside just because he's been, he's playing well, and they could go a lot more 3 receiver sets without Smith. That's what Zimmer said. So, but yeah, I have Conklin at 24. I think he is, a viable in best ball, and he does have some upside because, again, the tight end has been a big part of this offense, and Herndon is not really a threat for targets, even if they're running routes at the same time. So Conklin could factor in, give you some big weeks, maybe DFS play, low-owned DFS play or something like that. So that's how I kind of attack him. The Bears, another team where it's kind of top heavy. You have Montgomery. You have Allen Robinson. Is there any value on this team outside of them? Mooney, maybe?
Well, and Justin Fields, obviously, but we don't need to talk about him. He, if he starts week 2, he's going to crush his ADP. But yeah, Darnell Mooney for me. I keep mentioning this, but he was the 10th most targeted player downfield last year with 24 targets of 20 plus air yards. But the second worst catchable ball rate. Only 6 of those were catchable. So you would assume with improved quarterback play, which I think Justin Fields will bring, he's going to unlock that deep threat that Mooney has. So I think Mooney, as a high upside wide receiver, sort of in that Mecole Hardman, Elijah Moore range, just one of those guys where you're just taking a flyer. And if he doesn't pan out, he's not going to kill you. He's one of those guys that I'm targeting.
Yeah, I have him at 55, but, so in that glut, like you said, but I do like his upside. I do like to target him over, Curtis Samuel, and especially if it's not a full PPR format, because I think he has some air yard upside that is attractive, and he has that year two breakout potential here to crush his ADP if things go right. So like Mooney, but that's about it. Not really touching the tight ends, commit and Graham. Still, I think too much of a committee to find any true value there. And then the quarterback play is still not going to be great. So not really too interested in the Bears. And the O-line should be pretty bad as well. The Lions, DeAndre Swift still goes usually in the top 15, top 20, maybe with the ADP falling a little bit. But Jamal Williams usually goes closer to the 40th running back. Who do you think is the better value of those two guys?
Probably Williams. He's the anti-fragile type of back that you mentioned earlier, but he's the kind of guy where even when Swift is healthy, this could be closer to a 50-50 timeshare than people are willing to admit. So he might be able to provide some RB3 flex value on occasion, depending on the game script. We need to see how this kind of works out in the receiving game. But, if DeAndre Swift were to miss any time, I think Jamal Williams will be RB2, RB3 type of back. So that's why I tend to prefer the backup in situations like this. But you mentioned DeAndre Swift, his ADP has been all over the map. If he goes in the top 15, I'm basically not getting him at all. But if he falls to me in the RB20 range, I'll absolutely take a flyer on him. He should be closer to 100% going into week one than we thought, a couple weeks ago. So, I think he still has that upside. So he's the kind of guy where, again, if you're attacking wide receiver, tight end early in the draft, and he ends up falling to you as a low end RB2, I can get behind that. I think he is talented enough to warrant that. And, the Lions are going to have a ton of trailing game scripts. And I think Swift should be the pass catching back. Like I said, we'll see. But I think he'll still be playable in these negative game scripts. So that's why I still think Swift is okay at like RB20.
Yeah, I haven't gotten too much of him. I mean, you have the availability concerns. I do like, the breakout potential, but it's just tough for me to justify him over guys that project for a much safer carry floor, like Carson and Jacobs and James Robinson. Like Swift only averaged like about 9 carries per game last year. So we don't know if he's really going to jump because they did acquire Jamal Williams. Jamar Jefferson has played well in the preseason, the rookie. And then I think they might even keep a fourth back active. Godwin Iswabuke, or I'm not even sure how to pronounce his name, but they have a pretty loaded backfield to where they could mix and match and, kind of monitor Swift's reps. Cause there's been a lot of kind of negativity surrounding his availability and health from the coaching staff itself. So that does raise a little bit of a red flag. So in a full PBR, I think it's the best time to, kind of maximize the upside, but in half PBR and standard, I've been going to guys who I just think have safer carry floors in his ADP range. What about the receiving core? We love Hawkinson, but at wide receiver, I mean, somebody has to catch the ball here. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, the rookie, should be kind of a slot guy who could still be like top 2 in terms of routes because he's probably the best route runner on a team. And then Tyrell Williams should be locked into one starting role. And then who knows what they're going to do at the other side. They released Perriman, Cephas, Benson they traded for. Cephas could factor in. Khalif Raymond had a good camp. Who knows? But will St. Brown or Tyrell be viable at all, given that there is still some target share up for grabs there? Or are you staying away?
No, I think St. Brown is the guy worth targeting. Like, you get him basically for free. He's a better fit with Jared Goff. Tyrell Williams might be the alpha receiver that draws the top cornerback every week, and he's not really the playing style that Goff typically targets. So I think St. Brown's going to be sort of the target funnel, a la Cooper Kupp in the slot. We know Jared Goff's always willing to target his slot receiver. But at the end of the day, like you already mentioned, TJ Hawkinson is my boy. I think, at tight end 6, he's really my perfect draft strategy is getting TJ Hawkinson at tight end 6. He ultimately will be the number 1 target in this offense. I don't even think they have a backup tight end right now. So he's the number 1 target. But after that, I think Amon St. Brown out of the slot will be the number 2 target in this offense.
Yeah, Hawkinson has like 100 catch upside on his high range of outcomes, which you can't say for any of the receivers. So love Hawkinson. I think St. Brown, you maximize him by doing it in full PPR because I don't expect this team to throw a lot of touchdowns. And I expect St. Brown to have a low average depth of target, which is, is good because it helps you get, receptions. But I don't think the touchdowns will be there, and I don't know that the yardage will be there, just given that you have Jared Goff at quarterback too. So
yeah, he probably won't give you a Justin Jefferson type rookie season. But yeah, just like a 60 catch, nice little PPR season in deeper leagues for sure.
Yeah, I think the ceiling is like Cooper Kupp, who played well with Jared Goff his rookie year, but obviously that was a Sean McVay offense. This is an Anthony Lynn offense, so I mean, maybe Keenan Allen role, who knows? But there's some upside there, is what I'm saying. But I'm trying to maximize it, but I usually do it in full PPR. The NFC South, we have the Bucks. We have Evans and Godwin going pretty high in the top 20 receivers. There's no question about that, but this is a great offense. Tom Brady at the helm, good O-line. So among these middle round guys, who do you like as the best value? Antonio Brown, Ronald Jones, or Leonard Fournette?
Let me just start off by saying it's not Ronald Jones. So he's number 3 for me. And then it's probably a toss up, honestly, between Leonard Fournette, who I don't get. He's not a running back I seek out in drafts, but at RB 36, you could do worse. Maybe we see playoff Lenny all season. Who knows? But he's the only back in this offense that can kind of dominate the rushing work and receiving work if either Ronald Jones or Gio Bernard were to miss time. But Antonio Brown, I think he's one of those players where I have him ranked 45th, but I'd probably draft him much earlier. So his ADP at 35 does sound about right. I think that's that's sort of his ceiling, honestly, if everybody stays healthy. But he's probably the guy with the most upside out of these 3. So I would target him. Imagine if either Mike Evans or Chris Godwin were to go down. I mean, he has wide receiver 2 upside for sure. So he's one of those guys at that point in the draft. I am okay kind of reaching for that ceiling. So I would probably lean Antonio Brown out of these 3.
Yeah, I have an AB at 42, but I agree. I mean, I believe he averaged the most catches per game once they acquired him out of all of them. So, he was getting targeted on those like little gimme short routes. So it's not the same as it was in Pittsburgh necessarily, but he's still Antonio Brown. He's still a guy who can be a high volume receiver. So yeah, it's him for me. I don't hate Ronald Jones as much as I did earlier and I do end up getting him sometimes because when you look at the Bucs schedule, I mean, they just have a very, very favorable schedule. So there could be a scenario where, especially given how good the defense is and how, that the fact that you have a quarterback that's going to convert on third down and get you up and down the field, the running backs could be valuable, very valuable on this team, even though it is a committee. I mean, there's a lot of offenses these days with committees. So Ronald Jones has that double-digit touchdown upside, I still think. And Fournette, I think, gets dinged a little more because even though he got the receiving usage last year, I think that's why they went out and got Bernard, because they don't like Fournette's not really a great receiver. It's just, when you have Tom Brady and everyone else is going deep, you're gonna get some catches. But I think I do agree that he has that like dual threat capability, but I think the plan is to reduce his role. Whereas Jones' role, because he didn't ever rely on receiving usage in the first place, I think he kind of maintains the same role. So I think I actually like Jones more than Fournette. I have Jones 32 and Fournette 39 in half PPR.
Yeah, that's fair. And I was going to mention, Ronald Jones is too one-dimensional, but the Buccaneers should provide plenty of Ronald Jones game script. So I do like him in that regard, but I think Fournette definitely has a higher ceiling. And again, in this range at running back, that's kind of what I'm going for.
All right, let's go to the Falcons. Where are you ending up on Mike Davis?
I mean, I like Mike Davis. He's RB 22 right now. He really doesn't have much depth behind him. I know that they're talking about using Quadri Olison and Cordell Patterson as sort of a running back by committee, but this could be a pretty run heavy offense under Arthur Smith. So, I do like Mike Davis. Unfortunately, he does sort of fit the definition of a frozen pond running back, because although he's the week 1 starter, I mean, he's not a lock to hang on to all season. He's been a journeyman his entire career. He had the breakout season last year when CMC went down. But anything can happen in this backfield. The one thing going for him, like I said, is the depth chart behind him is pretty weak. But there is still some uncertainty there. So having said that, I urge a little bit of caution drafting him at running back 22, but that's where my projections have him ranked.
Yeah, I actually have him RB19. So
yeah,
I think I'm a little
crazy.
Yeah, I think I'm a little higher on consensus, and I don't mind him at all because, yeah, number one, the backfield is pretty weak depth wise, but number two, I read a quote from Arthur Blank, the owner, and I love kind of getting inside these organizations' heads because I think that's where the edge is, not in like who's catching the ball at camp or this or that. It's going to be all puff pieces, but sometimes you can find an edge just understanding what the organization is thinking. And, I think the question was asked of him, like, why did you go with an offensive guy in Arthur Smith after you had all these defensive guys like Dan Quinn and whatnot? And he was like, we need to like run the ball. And well, that's not the best thing from a, football analytics standpoint. He's the owner, and there's going to be an emphasis on running the ball. So I totally agree. I think this offense could look completely different. Remember, Arthur Smith is the king of running the shit out of the ball. Obviously he had Derrick Henry, but that's what he's done. And he's made a passing game effective by doing it. But the running back has been very valuable in his offenses. And, the owner is saying like, hey, when we were good and we were winning, we had a run game and we would run efficiently, and that would help our defense, which we know isn't that great. And it's going to take some time to rebuild. So I think this is a team that's fully going to try to implement that Tennessee strategy to some degree. And remember, the Falcons have been like the pass heaviest team the last couple of years in the league. I mean, it was, they were in the mid 650s in pass attempts every year. So we could see a dramatically different offense, and it's just hard, because I do have, I'm projecting Davis for only about 50 on the season, only about 50-ish, 55% of the total running back carries, after counting in the missed games, but I still have him up pretty high. It's going to be hard. Allison's not really a threat to run too many routes out of the backfield. Mm-hmm. And then Patterson, he's not even he's like a running back wide receiver hybrid. So Davis should be on the field for a lot of pass snaps, and they should put an emphasis on running the ball. So I think, I'm fine with him. Again, I think this is just a better RB2 tier than years past. And I like Davis a lot more than a guy like Todd Gurley, and Todd Gurley even was fine last year. So I think he got benched.
Yeah, Davis is 20 years old, but he doesn't have that much tread on his tires. He has 412 career carries, so he might be a little bit fresher than your average 28-year-old running back. So that's certainly going in his favor. And obviously, he's no Derrick Henry. We know that, but he does at least have that pass catching upside that Henry doesn't really have. So I could see how he would just thrive in this Arthur Smith offense.
Yeah, he plays hard. He'll get you some yards after the contact. Yeah. Probably not going to be a high yard per carry guy, all things considered. But I'm a little higher on him. I don't mind getting him, especially late fifth, early sixth if you need that second running back. Or
didn't he have the highest broken tackle rate of qualified running backs last year? I think that I might need to double check that, but pretty sure.
I can check right now. Let's see. I do see that he was seventh on the year in missed tackles forced in PFF, and pretty much every running back on that list had more carries than him on the top six. So he should be up there. Yeah, he should be up there. He averaged 3 yards after contact, which is very good. So yeah, I think he's a solid pick here. Not down on him at all. Just given the situation. For Carolina, I think we love Terrace Marshall, especially David Moore being released, but we also love Robbie Anderson. And then DJ Moore has put up 2 straight 1,100+ yard seasons. And there's also Christian McCaffrey, and there's also Dan Arnold should be more involved than Ian Thomas last year. So I guess my concern is like, how likely are we to get a bust or two out of this Carolina pass catching unit, given that we still have Sam Darnold at quarterback? Like, how many pass catchers can Sam Darnold truly support?
Yeah, probably not more than 2 or 3, right? And, CMC will probably be an every week hit. So that leaves, like 1 or 2 receivers after that. So I'm very worried that, like a DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson could be inconsistent. So that's why, DJ Moore I think he's wide receiver 18 now, kind of scares me. I don't like to overspend in an offense like this where you made a great point. Like, this is a Sam Darnold offense. So I would say DJ Moore, I'd be cautious about that. And I do like a guy like Terrence Marshall way later because you can get him, super cheap. He might be the odd man out most weeks, but he will have weeks, where he scores a touchdown or where he's heavily involved. So he's a guy that can also kind of impact DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson negatively. So this is this is offense they have to be careful about. They were able to support 3 receivers last year with Teddy Bridgewater, but Christian McCaffrey was out for most of the season, so that might be why. So I'd be very careful. And the thing I've been doing is just not drafting DJ Moore at wide receiver 18 because of the lower floor this offense will have week to week.
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 25. So
whoa.
Yeah, and that's because I still have Anderson at 32. And Marshall, even though I have him projected for about, close to 80% of the routes per game, like Samuel ran last year, he's still my wide receiver 70 because he just, there's just only so many targets to go around, and we don't know. We can't just project like a huge change in efficiency for Darnold. Like, I do have him better than he was in his Jets days. Teddy Bridgewater averaged, I think it was 7.6 yards per attempt. So the receivers will definitely help Darnold, but you also have to account for the fact that, Dan Arnold should command a bigger target share than Thomas, who was essentially running routes and nothing was happening when he ran those routes. So it's just a numbers game where unless you're a huge believer in Darnold taking a big step, I think there's going to be at least some inconsistency, even if these guys kind of hit their overall marks by the end of the season. You may not know exactly when to bench or start some of them. So it's weird. It's a weird offense where it's like, I'm not too excited about it. I've been getting some Robbie when he was going real late, but now it really depends on the league. Sometimes he goes in line with my projection of wide receiver 32. Sometimes you can still get him later. So that's about it.
It's also unlikely that all these players stay healthy for all 17 games. So I think the weeks where 1 or 2 of these players are out, the rest will benefit. But that's why you don't want to invest in like needing players to get hurt or miss time for a guy to hit. But that's where the upside for a guy like Marshall comes into play, is if either DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson miss time, I think he does have that wide receiver 3 upside. But other than that, when they're all healthy, super low floor for everybody.
Yeah, and I think you're right about Moore because it's just he's the guy that's still going in that premium range where he might have already hit his ceiling, 1,100 plus yards in back-to-back years.
Yeah.
Like, there's not much higher he can go just given all of the guys around him and the balance around him. But he's going in that range where you want that like wide receiver 1 overall upside still. That I just don't know if Moore truly gives you that, even though he's been great and he's a great receiver. He might have from a numbers perspective, he might have topped out with the yardage these last couple of seasons. The Saints, who's a top value for you outside of Alvin Kamara? Marquez Callaway? Is it Michael Thomas, Troutman, Traquan, Latavius? Who do you like? Who are you targeting the most outside of Alvin Kamara?
It's probably Latavius. He's always the anti-fragile back I like to get, sort of in that RB 45 to RB 50 range. I know there was some concern that he might be leapfrogged by Tony Jones. That doesn't appear to be the case. So I still think he's safe in the RB 45 range. Other than that, these guys aren't really guys I'm targeting. Marquez Callaway, I do like him, but his ADP is wide receiver 44 now. That's pretty rich, especially when you factor in that, Michael Thomas should return at some point. So I think Callaway's value is only going to go down. Like, when it comes to the fantasy playoffs, are going to be starting Callaway? Probably not. Taysom Hill could take over at any time. I think once that happens, you're not going to like Callaway as much. So I think, of all the preseason overreactions, I think Callaway being, wide receiver 44 might be one of them, unfortunately. But outside of Kamara, this is an offense I'm basically staying away from now, other than Latavius Murray as a high upside backup.
I actually love Callaway. I think people should still be drafting him because, number one, he's going to start the season well. You still have Winston, you have Thomas out. So if you can get, a guy in that range who gives you, I think, legit like wide receiver 2 upside, he should be a target hog every week. all these weeks that Thomas is out. And when you look at like the rest of the Saints, you know, you have Kamara there with Thomas out. There's really no other guy that's going to command targets. You know, like Troutman was a very low like target per route run guy. Traquan Smith ridiculously low, and Callaway's like he should be right there. And then when Thomas gets back, I think you're going to see a few more. Like it's going to be a little bit of a higher volume pass offense, and you know all the defensive attention is going to be on Kamara and Thomas. So I think Callaway still can have, you know, decent weeks even then. So I still like him going here because I just, and just based on how well he, like, you know, how well he's played. Because the Saints are another team that they tend to unearth these receivers like like Colston, Willie Snead. You know, they've had a lot of productive guys that coming into the season, or at least their first seasons, really being in a prominent role, people kind of wrote off, and then you look back and it's like, oh, this guy was really productive. So I like Callaway. I still like Callaway. He's the guy. Murray, I do get, but you know, just because of, you know, there's been some skepticism and he is getting a little older. Like I'm not as excited as I was maybe like 1-2 years ago about it. I still think if Kamara goes down, he leads the way and he gives you that running back one upside, but he is also a guy that could kind of fall off a cliff. And I mean, maybe he does at some point get leapfrog too. So
do you have week 1 projections or rankings by any chance?
I haven't started that yet.
Because I have Callaway wide receiver 31. I was curious where you have him, but I do agree that he will get off to a fast start. But I like having really strong receivers, so I prefer having like a Jerry Jeudy as my wide receiver 3, not Callaway. But certainly, if you're in a situation where you know you attack running back early on or tight end, and Callaway's your wide receiver 3 to begin the year, I won't slam you for that. But I just think that his value will only go down as the year goes on, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, he's going as a wide receiver 44, and sometimes later than that in like more casual leagues. So it's like we're in these sharp drafts where
exactly
like he goes at like wide receiver 35, and like I don't need to start him as my wide receiver 3. And like you said, you have him ranked inside the wide receiver 3 ranks already in week 1, even in a tough matchup against Green Bay, right?
Yeah, that's why he's tricky to discuss, because again, if you're stashing him on your bench, you know, you're kind of losing that value. He's going to hit the ground running week 1. So it sort of depends on your format, but certainly if you can get him outside of the wide receiver 50 range, he's obviously worth it. There's just guys like, I think I'd rather take a guy like Will Fuller, honestly, in that range. Maybe Michael Gallup in that range. But other than that, I think, if you can get around wide receiver 45 and Michael Gallup and Will Fuller are off the board, I can certainly get behind that.
All right, let's go to the West and we'll finish it out with the Rams and the Niners and the Seahawks. Let's start with the Cardinals. Chase Edmonds and James Conner. Edmonds usually goes right around the mid 20s in running back ADP, maybe the low 20s. Conner usually about 10 spots lower than that, maybe in the outside, definitely usually outside the top 100 picks in that running back 35 to 40 range. Who's the better value for you at ADP?
I would say Edmonds probably has the higher ceiling, so he's probably the better value. But honestly, both running backs sort of offer some value at ADP, because I think even if both stay healthy, they should be able to kind of outproduce this ADP. And if either one goes down, I mean, they're going to be pretty legit RB2s. But it depends if James Conner inherits like the full Kenyon Drake role. I mean, Edmonds was still able to put up RB28 numbers even with Kenyon Drake there. So I think Edmonds is probably the guy for me, because he just has that massive upside. I think he could be like legit RB2 if Conner were to go down. But even if Conner's healthy, he still has his defined role where he's a RB3 kind of flex guy, more valuable in PPR format. So I'd say out of these two, Edmonds for me.
Yeah, I like both. Like it's like, because Edmonds, I have him, RB24 in full PPR, and I think he has upside for even more than that. But Conner is also right there as like a fringe top 30 guy for me, just because Arizona almost never splits the carries 3 ways. So yeah, if Edmonds gets hurt, I think Conner will be like a 20 carry per game guy. If Conner gets hurt, I think Edmonds will be like a 20 carry per game guy. And even if they're splitting work, Edmonds with his receiving usage, and he'll probably get like 8 to 10 carries, and then there's still probably double-digit carries on the table for Connor with a couple catches here and there. And you do have that Kenyon Drake upside, and even though Kenyon Drake, people were down on him last year, once as the season kind of progressed, he was still like a top 20 back.
RB14.
Right. Yeah. So Kenyon, even though it wasn't maybe impressive week in, week out, it was kind of ugly. Kenyon Drake still got it done. And these carries have to go somewhere. And this is also one of the fastest paced teams in the entire NFL. So Arizona was number 1 in Football Outsiders situation adjusted pace at 27.1 seconds between plays. So that just gives even more upside and a higher floor to this backfield. That should be all you see. It's just those two guys. When one went down, Edmonds got the other got all the carries last year. So like both of those guys at their ADP. For the 49ers, we have maybe a similar situation, but they're just a more crowded backfield. You have Trey Sermon, the rookie, and you have Raheem Mostert, the incumbent starter. Mostert has, he's a talented guy, but never really held up over like a full season with a big workload. So where are you on those two guys in terms of value at ADP? Sermon usually goes a little higher than Mostert.
This is a similar situation where I think both are worth drafting. I think Mostert will hit the ground running. So if you're in a situation where you need a guy to start right away, Mostert's your guy. Week 1 rankings, I have him RB21. They're against the Lions. I think he's gonna have a good game to start the season. And I have Sermon RB34. But I think as the season goes on, Sermon's gonna catch up ground and eventually overtake him. And certainly, Mostert hasn't been the healthiest back. He's had his injury issues. So he could end up missing time. And then Sermon has, RB1, RB2 sort of upside. They just cut Wayne Gallman. So that kind of clears up this RB3 role. So I think both backs, honestly, the 49ers are always a situation I'm trying to invest in. So you can make a case where, if you go 0 RB and you need a running back 2 in this range, take Raheem Mostert, because you can start him the first handful of games, or maybe even the whole season. We'll see. But then Sermon's the kind of guy I like to have on my bench, where I think he's going to peak come fancy, playoff time. He'll have games where he starts. So I think Sermon's probably the better long-term investment, but I can get behind either one of these backs.
Yeah, I mean, when the offseason started, I was kind of anti-drafting San Francisco backs, period, because Gallman was still there. There was just a lot of uncertainty, Mitchell, Hasty, but now it's cleared up a little bit because, Gallman got cut. Wilson's going to be out, to start the year. And then Mitchell's been hurt as well. So, he just is getting back into the flow of things. So I think it's going to be somewhat similar to the Denver situation, where you have a good defense, you have a good running situation, and these two guys should dominate the work. Now, I think there is a little bit lower of a floor at both of them, just because you do have some other backs still there, and Shanahan's been known to kind of mix it up. But so I like the Denver backs more, like Gordon. I rather Gordon in place of Mostert, at ADP, or Williams in place of Sermon. But don't hate these guys anymore. They're just both kind of mid-range RB3s with high-end, RB2 upside. So don't hate them as much as I did coming in, but I've been getting more of the Denver backfield in my own drafts. For Seattle, we know they might increase the pace. We know Russell Wilson, Chris Carson, and then Metcalf and Lockett. That's a big 4. There's not much to say about those guys. You're happy if you get any of those guys wherever they're going. But given that, Wilson is very efficient and could be a higher paced team than we've seen in years past, is there any other way to invest in this offense, do you think, outside of those big 4? Like, I've seen Gerald Everett start to creep into the top 150 in some spots. Would he be the guy you target, or are you just kind of staying away, or somebody else?
No, I think Everett is an interesting flyer, especially, again, this tight end 2 tier is getting decimated. So he's all the way up to tight end 17 for me. So he's a good, cheap way to invest in this offense. He could end up being the number 3 target. He's already familiar with offensive coordinator Shane Waldron from their time here in LA with the Rams. So I think he could be an interesting flyer, and being the number 3 target in a Russell Wilson led offense, you can't go wrong with that. So I think out of all those guys, I think Everett would be the best way to invest in this offense cheaply. But again, I've mentioned it before in this pod that Chris Carson is definitely my most targeted Seahawk. I get him consistently at the end of the RB2 tier. I think he's just a lock for the workhorse role. The only downside with Chris Carson, though, is he tends to be a violent runner and take big hits. So he's usually going to miss a game or two every year. But I factored that in already, and he's my running back 14. But Chris Carson, I think, is the best bang for your buck player on the Seahawks.
For me, I get Lockett even more. And I get a lot of Carson, but I get Lockett even more because just with my draft strategy, I'm usually drafting wide receivers in that range over a running back. So, as good as Metcalf is, Russell Wilson's just so good that he's going to support 2 receivers. There tends to be a very concentrated target share there in Seattle. And the better Metcalf is, the more it's just going to open things up for Carson. So, for Carson too, but for Tyler Lockett.
Everybody.
Yeah, right. So I'm not worried about like Metcalf. Oh, he's going to have this humongous breakout because he already did. But Lockett's going to disappear. I mean, last year, it seems like Metcalf went off, and he did. He had 1,303 yards, but you look at the targets, and it was Lockett 132, Metcalf 129, receptions, Lockett 100, Metcalf 83. So Lockett was right there. It's not going to be as sexy, but he's still a very good receiver. They both had 10 touchdowns, and a lot of that is just he's had that experience that with Russell Wilson, and Russell Wilson's going to look for him anytime Metcalf is covered, and that's what it's going to be. As far as like investing in the offense, yeah, I've warmed up to Everett a little bit. I think the tight end isn't usually a huge part of the offense, aside from that, like Will Dissly, those random Will Dissly like breakout stretches. But I think for a deep sleeper, I don't mind D. Eskridge, the rookie, because he's going essentially for free in that range where you say, okay, like Freddie Swain had, I think, barely any production and David Moore as those kind of code number 3 wide receivers last year. So there's a spot for somebody to emerge as that number 3 target. And, Everett, you're having to pay a little more for him now, whereas Eskridge is free and they could scheme him some looks. So that's the guy I actually love targeting a little more. Like I don't hate Everett at all. It's just Eskridge is even freer than Everett, and I think has similar upside. So it's him for me. But I think definitely an offense that I would not shy away from because they're already super efficient. And if they increase the pace, I mean, it could just get silly because it could be like that first 8 weeks of Russell Wilson last year, like all year long. So,
I would love that. Oh
my goodness. So that would be great. Let's close it out with the Rams. This offense, to me, I don't know, like it feels like it's not being talked about enough how good this offense could be now that Sean McVay has a quarterback that he's comfortable with, because he was already great at scheming up ways for Jared Goff to throw for like 4,500 yards and be very efficient. But now you got Stafford, you got somewhat of an incentive to pass more because Cam Akers went down and even Xavier Jones went down. You have, kind of a new running back in Michelle and one that's still a little unproven in Henderson. So what are the ceilings you think for like Woods and Kupp and Higbee?
I think they're very high. I've been talking about them. I don't know where you've been, but
I mean, obviously, us, but I mean, like
outside of us, yeah. But yeah, I love Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp in this wide receiver 2 tier. I love Tyler Lockett as well. Like I love this entire tier, but those
entire division,
the entire division. Brandon Ayuk as well. But yeah, Woods and Kupp, like their ceilings get elevated a ton with Matthew Stafford. Let me mention these stats one more time this offseason. So last year, the Rams ranked 24th in pass attempts, 20 plus yards or more. That should go up with Matthew Stafford. They ranked 30th in pass attempts in the red zone last season. And those numbers look even worse when you consider they had the 12th most pass attempts. So, Jared Goff was holding back their ceilings. Obviously, he boosted their floor because he targeted them so heavily. But, Stafford's going to give them so many more of these high-value targets, deep targets, end zone targets that, these guys have legit wide receiver 1 potential. So yeah, I love targeting Woods and Cup. And then honestly, guys like D-Jax in a best ball format, you can't go wrong with that. The 5 games he's going to play, he's going to go off. We know that. But even like a guy like Van Jefferson, I think the wide receiver 3 in this offense now is a thing. Remember when Jared Goff was really good, we were, playing guys like Brandon Cooks, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods every week. I think we could see an offense like that now. So I love investing in this offense. Tyler Higbee as well. I think he's low end tight end 1. So I think Matthew Stafford he elevates everybody's ceiling in this offense.
Yeah, and you get with Woods especially, you get those rush attempts, which really enhance his floor ceiling combo. So I actually have Woods and Kupp, and this might sound surprising, but I have Woods and Kupp ranked ahead of Allen Robinson because I think when you're looking at Robinson, it's going to have to be a lot of volume driven. It's going to be so volume driven where Woods and Kupp already have the volume anyway. And they have the track record, but their ceilings haven't really been accessed in a way that Matthew Stafford could access them. So I think they're high floor, high ceiling plays. And like Sean McVay is brilliant. And whereas like Matt Nagy is kind of, we've seen kind of a little bit of a downturn there. I mean, Robinson should be fine. I'm just saying, like, in terms of ceiling, I think Woods and Kupp have a little bit more touchdown upside in this offense. And I just think, they might not have to do it all on short stuff now with Stafford. So remember when he had Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, and Kenny Golladay, I think it was for 1 year, and they were all very productive. Like it could be like that, except Deshaun Jackson's not going to be his high volume guy. So I do love him in best ball, but I mean, just look at where that's going to leave Kupp and Woods. Those guys could be like big week in, week out producers, and they have already been. I mean, Cooper Kupp always finishes in the top 15 or 20, in points per game or just total production. Same thing for Woods, and so I don't really see much downside with them, and I see a whole lot of upside. And they usually go after a couple of guys like a Robinson, who he's fine. He should get a lot of targets, but the upside might be even with Fields at quarterback. Like I think I'd still prefer like this Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay offense by a lot. So. Love Woods and Kupp, and I think those guys are great guys to target in that 3rd, 4th round. Just another reason why I almost always go on receiver in that range. It's just there's so many guys I like that. Like I don't like it, if I already have even if I only have like one running back or even no running backs, it's like it's hard for me to pass up these guys consistently because they're just such good floor ceiling combos. So Woods, Kupp, go draft those guys. You would not be disappointed. And that's going to do it. Final rankings, man. We went through a lot. You guys can check out our final rankings up at actionnetwork.com. They're all in our fantasy tool. And go check it out, actionnetwork.com. Don't forget to also download the award-winning Action Network app. And you can follow Sean on Twitter at @the_oddsmaker. You can follow me at Chris Raybon, and you can find us at those same handles in the Action app as well. Also, don't forget to rate and review the pod. We're on a new feed, so we can give you guys 5 episodes a week during the regular season. So definitely subscribe if you haven't already. And we got some winners for our contest. We promised if you guys rated and reviewed the show, we were going to give you some free swag. So Sean, we got a couple more winners that we're going to give some free swag to. Who are our lucky winners this week?
So our winners this week are T Stein 789 and Shane Ohoff.
T Stein 789 and Shane Ohoff, congratulations. Please contact podcasts at actionnetwork.com to claim your prize. That's podcasts at actionnetwork.com. All right. That is going to do it for us for this episode. Until next week, let's get this money.